OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
7:30 on this Friday morning. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. Owen with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And you know what? It actually feels like a fairly regular weekend of sport. We've got plenty coming up to preview the weekend. The return of football doesn't mean the end of John Giles' 11 series, though. In a little while, we've got his old firm all-time 11 coming up in just a moment. But last night also included a fairly regular Thursday night football, as you can imagine, with John, as he reacted to Wednesday night's kick-off to the Premier League, the resumption of the Premier League, and he also looked ahead to the weekend. So that's coming your way in just a few moments. Phil Egan's going to be with us later as well for a brand new slot called Monday's Headlines Today, which is something that definitely can't go wrong. We're going to look into the crystal ball and make a load of wacky predictions. So 100% something that is not going to bite us in the ass come Monday. So Phil Egan will be up looking ahead to the weekend's football later. Sports page is coming your way as ever in about an hour's time. Can you believe it? Jose Mourinho not in the best of form in his press conference yesterday. So that's dominating the headlines. Also great stuff from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer on Marcus Rashford. And news this morning that Chris Froome may be changing team. So plenty happening across the back pages, which we'll get to later. And Alan Quinlan, as ever, here on a Friday morning. He'll be with us to chat rugby and the fairly choppy waters that needs to be navigated in Irish rugby at the moment. We'll also be chatting about what he's thought of New Zealand rugby and Super Rugby coming back to our screens over the last week or so. Friday, though, as well, as you may have become accustomed to over the last couple of months, has become Mt Rushmore morning. And this morning, it is County Derry. It's a very, very interesting slot. We've got Chrissy, McKaigue, and we have got Cahair coming up to, I think, educate us on a lot of the picks in this that are from GEA, that are not from GEA. It's a very, very interesting discussion coming your way later on. And we would love to hear from you. You can tweet us at Off the Ball. If you happen to be watching on Facebook or on YouTube, you can just comment on the stream below. Tell us what you're most looking forward to about this weekend, because as I say, it kind of feels like there is a semblance of normality that exists in our sporting sphere once again. But let's get into John Giles on Thursday Night Football. Here is his all-time Old Firm 11, starting with the goalkeeper.
Packy was a terrific goalkeeper. I mean, Shay Given was a terrific. It was great to have the two of them. I mean, I just went for Shay because he's a great goalkeeper as well. But I'd have the highest respect for Packy, and definitely would no problem picking him in the two of
this team, yeah, perfect.
This team, yeah.
Celtic's Packy Bonner is the goalkeeper on this team. Let's talk defenders then. 3 centre halves, and again, you have them in a short list, so I'll run through some of them. David Weir, Mick McCarthy, John Clark, Terry Butcher. Yeah,
I've gone for Terry Butcher.
Okay.
Yeah, Terry Butcher was he was part of the exodus, if that's the right word, that Graham Souness did when he went to Rangers. He reversed everything, Nathan, because the English clubs used to always buy the Scottish players. And this is the first time this ever happened when Graham went as manager of Rangers. Obviously had the money to do it, to do what needed to be done. And he brought the English players in, and Butcher was an outstanding player.
He was clearly very highly rated. Like, obviously a bit of a sliding doors moment in his career when he's on the verge of going to Manchester United, gets injured. United don't go through with the deal. They sign Steve Bruce instead, and obviously Bruce goes on to become a legendary figure and win all those titles. Butcher's quality, though, as a defender, how good was he?
I think he was better than Bruce, myself.
Okay.
Steve Bruce was a good player. Butcher was a big lad, Nathan, and sometimes you get big lads, they're not necessarily aggressive, but he was aggressive. He was a bit like John Terry.
Right.
That's the nearest I could come to him. Big, strong, you wouldn't take any liberties with him. Good in the air and a good competitor.
Yeah.
No, he was a hard nut. You wouldn't be messing around with him.
Yeah, and I guess everybody does that iconic photo with the bandage on his head and the blood flowing out. It was John Terry-esque in that sense, in putting his head places where he probably shouldn't. No,
definitely. He's a top class defender, and going to Rangers at that particular time, Nathan. As I said, Souness reversed all that thing with the England players going up there instead of the one-way system of Scottish players coming to England. And Butcher was I think he was a big success for them.
All right, so Terry Butcher of Rangers is the first centre-half. Let's go through the second list of defenders then. You have Willie Miller, Colin Hendry, Graham Roberts, Billy McNeil, Virgil van Dijk.
I've gone for Billy McNeil. People might say Van Dijk. Van Dijk, I think, will be a great... I think he was a terrific Celtic player, but I think he'll be known as a great Liverpool player. And he when I say only, I think he only played like 70 matches for
Celtic,
Celtic, whereas Billy McNeil played 486, and they might be just league matches. So I'm going for the service that they gave the club, and I'm sure Van Dijk obviously will be considered a great player after his time at Liverpool. But I couldn't put him in front of Billy McNeil or the players that I've picked.
Yeah, I don't think you could have any team representing Celtic that Billy McNeil isn't part of. There as a player, manager, club ambassador for more than 60 years and captain of that Lisbon Lions team. When you played that team then in 1970, those leadership qualities, were they something that stood out when you'd go up against Billy McNeil?
Oh, yeah. He was that type of character. He was just in him, Nathan. You know, he was a big man, quite good on his feet, very good in the air. And he was captain of... he was a real captain. You know, you hear the captain sometimes, and it's a bit exaggerated. But I think Billy was the real McKaigue in that way. He did it on the pitch, did it himself, which was the main thing, and inspired people around him. And I think he had a big relationship with Jock Stein as well.
Right. What was he like as a player then?
Good. He was quick enough. He commanded, like it was different. The centre halves are different than they are now. As you know, they're playing out from the back and that. I still think he'd be able to do it, but the emphasis wasn't playing from out at the back at that time. Usually marking a big centre forward and covering up and that. You know, covering the ground and that. And Billy was a really top class player.
That Celtic team, were they a very stylish team?
Depends what stylish is, Nathan. You know, like the terrific players who could. I mean, I've seen players who Rodney Marsh, for example. People would consider him a very, very stylish player, and he was. But I wouldn't reckon. I don't think he'd get into the Celtic team, for example. You know, when you had Bertie Auld and all these terrific Jimmy Johnson, who were terrifically effective, and certainly easy on the eye, in my opinion. But effective is the main thing, Nathan.
Yeah.
You know, Bobby Murdoch, Bertie Auld, these players, Jimmy Johnson, Billy McNeil, terrific players.
Did Billy McNeil have an aura about him?
Yeah, he had a sense. Well, I had a sense of him that when he went out on the pitch, he was going to take responsibility for what needed to be done in his particular part of the pitch, so he could inspire by his own performance people around him. As he would say now, he'd be a real captain.
Right. So Billy McNeil, I think, again, probably one of the more straightforward selections in this combined Celtic Rangers team. Your final centre-back then, the shortest you have are Alan Stubbs, Paul Elliott, Gary Gillespie and Richard Gough.
Yeah, I've gone for Richard Gough.
Okay, Richard Gough featuring for the second time. He's obviously a player you had a lot of time for.
Yeah, he was again, a terrific player. He's another fellow, he played over 300 matches for Rangers. You know, he'd be, like from the Rangers' point of view, Rangers supporters, a real defender, Nathan. He was quick as well. He was aggressive enough, but he was quick. He might have been quicker than Billy McNeil. Covered the ground well, used the ball well. He was more like a player that played off the centre-back than a centre-half. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
In those days. It'd be like Jack Charlton, Norman Hunter. You know, they'd be combined between the two of them. One would be going for the ball, the other would be covering up and that. But he could cover the ground well. He was a top-class player.
And obviously a brilliant captain as well. Captained Rangers to their 9 in a row, to all 9 of those titles through the 80s and 90s. And quite a coup to get him, considering he'd captained Spurs to the 87 Cup final. He only spent the one season at Tottenham.
Yes.
And probably funny enough, a player maybe that you don't talk about of the great centre-halves of that era. His name doesn't come up too often.
No, he was one of those lads just got on with the job. He wasn't spectacular. He didn't have to be. But as you say, he captained. He's only a year at Spurs, but it shows Rangers at that time were able to buy the best players back up to Scotland, and to do 9 on the bounce as captain. I mean, he has to be a Rangers legend. You know, that's the reason I'm picking the players for the length. A lot of them for the length of time that they spent at the club, and won things at the club.
Right. So your three centre halves then are Terry Butcher, Billy McNeil, and Richard Gough. You're going with a 3-4-3. So once again, unfortunately, the fullbacks are going to miss out on this. If you were to pick a right back and a left back, I know you have a couple of shortlists for the right back: Danny McGrain, Gary Stevens, Sandy Jardine, David Hay, Jim Craig. Who's the pick of those?
I'd go for Sandy Jardine.
Right.
In that, Nathan. And left side, I'd go for Tommy Gemmell.
Right. So you also had Alan Hunter, John Brown, and Eric Caldo. Tommy Gemmell, as a player, a sort of real legendary name of the Scottish game. What was he like?
He was one of the attacking left backs. Full-backs in those days, which there weren't that many of, not like today. You know, that he wasn't a wing-back, he was a full-back that came forward at the right time. And I think Tommy scored a spectacular goal, I think, in the final when they won in '67. Not that he was a goal scorer, but he scored a few. He had a good shot on him, but he was expected to attack when it was on to attack. And he could do it. Another big fella, but he was very mobile, bit of a character as well. But they got the job done.
All right, so Tommy Gemmell would have been the left back in the team. Let's move on to the midfielders then. You're going to pick four midfielders. The first shortlist is Alfie Conn, Paul Lambert, Jimmy Johnston, Bertie Auld, Dave Wilson and Stilian Petrov. Who have you gone for? I've
gone for Jimmy.
All right, well, I think we've spoken about what made Jimmy Johnston so great. You touched on Bertie Auld there a couple of times when you were talking about that Celtic team, so you could only pick one or the other. Bertie Auld as a player and his contribution, because he was part of that Lisbon line side as well. Yeah,
I haven't picked Bertie in the four, actually, and I feel guilty about it. He was a terrific player. Bertie was a terrific player. And, you know, Graham described me as nasty. I was tame compared to Bertie. But Bertie could play. Actually, he was a funny career. He was at Celtic and then he went to Birmingham City, Nathan, for a while, and as a left winger. And Birmingham weren't a very good team. Bertie was always a good player, but when he went back to Celtic, he came back as a midfield player with Jock Steen, and he was brilliant. He was a tough nut, but he could play. Bertie was a top class player.
All right, so but Jimmy Johnston, who we spoke about earlier, and the genius that he was, unsurprisingly your first selection in this combined Celtic Rangers team. Second midfielder then, the shortlist for this: Mikel Arteta, Willie Stevenson, Scott Brown, Bobby Murdoch, John Collins, Ronald de Boer or Mark Walters. Who have you gone for?
I think I've gone for Bobby Murdoch there, Nathan.
Yeah, talk to us about Bobby Murdoch then.
Well, again, a bit simple. It wasn't quite as quick as Bertie in the middle of the field, but they were right pair. He was a real classy player. He could get on the ball, he could dribble, he could distribute the ball well, Nathan. Now, he was one that, if you were watching, you could really enjoy watching. He was a classy player as well as being an effective player. Again, he was at Celtic a long time, but real class. Actually, he moved to Middlesbrough. He played in the match that I had to go with Graham later on in his career.
Right.
But Celtic was his main. They played a lot of matches.
Yeah, over 500 appearances for Celtic.
He was top notch, really, and good to watch. Easy on the eye.
It's funny, Jock Steen said he was probably the best player I ever managed, and we've spoken about Jimmy Johnston, who was the genius, but this has come up a lot during this series of picking all-time 11s, how certain managers, there's something about certain players that maybe represent them best on the pitch, and they like them more than the superstar.
Did Jock Steen say that about?
Jock Steen said Bobby. That, yeah.
Yeah, well, like all managers, all people, they can have their favourites, Nathan. It might have been his manner, his temperament, that was easy to get along with. I mean, Bertie Auld, I don't know, but Bertie was fiery on the pitch, and he might have been fiery off the pitch, where there could have been a couple of. I don't know, but I'd say Jimmy Johnston was hard to manage, Nathan. Really hard to manage.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, definitely. I was surprised if he wasn't. Whereas Bobby might be a very sensible lad, easy going, come in, do his stuff, and also the way he played. You know, I mean, he was just a terrific player.
So, Bobby Murdoch alongside Jimmy Johnston, two Celtic midfielders to start with. Let's go and pick the third midfielder. The shortlist: Ray Wilkins, Roy Keane, Stuart McCall, John Greig, Graham Souness, Bobby Lennox and Willie Henderson. Who have you gone for?
Sorry, give me that again.
So you had Ray Wilkins, Roy Keane, Stuart McCall, John Craig, Graham Souness, Bobby Lennox and Willie Henderson.
John Craig.
Right.
John Craig. John Craig was like if you get Rangers supporters, you couldn't leave him out of a team, Nathan. He'd 755 appearances in 17 years with Rangers, and he was a battler. I played against him a few times, and he give you everything he's got, and he wouldn't be classy like Bobby Murdoch and that, but he'd be probably the holding midfield player playing today.
Right.
But gave everything he got, Nathan. He wouldn't have lasted that long with Rangers without being the character he was.
Yeah, he was voted...
I'd say he'd be a legend with Rangers supporters, if we've got any Rangers supporters listening to us, Nathan.
One or two. He was voted, actually, at the turn of the century, their greatest ever player. Was John Craig. And I saw he started out as a forward, moved back into a more midfield position, and it's interesting you say he might have been the more defensive midfielder. Did you see how at one stage he could have been a forward? Was there that bit of creativity to his game as well?
No, not necessarily. Well, usually happens with lads who move backwards. It's easier for them, Nathan. You know, they're coming onto the ball a lot. But I wouldn't have imagined him as a forward player. Like he did his best. I think he did his best work tackling and winning the ball and serving it.
That Rangers team, so we spoke about the Celtic game in 1970. That Rangers team, they won the Cup Winners' Cup in 72, and there was it the Fairs Cup at the time where you might have played Rangers a couple of times. Would you have gone up against Rangers in and around that period?
Oh yeah, we played them in the Fairs Cup, Nathan.
And how did they compare to that Celtic team of a similar
Well, they went in the same class at that time. Before Jock came, now they had a couple of years that they dominated. Well, Celtic, before Jock came, actually didn't win the league for about 9 or 10 years, Nathan. So Rangers would have been having a better time than Celtic at that particular time, but they didn't dominate in the way that Celtic did when they did get going.
Yeah.
But they were winning the cup now and again in the league, and I think they won the Cup Winners' Cup in that particular time. But we played them. We beat them 2-0 at Leeds, and we drew no score.
Yeah, you scored a penalty, did you? I think in the 2-0.
I did. Yeah. So we won relatively comfortably in that match.
Let's pick your final midfielder then. So John Craig is the third player picked in there. The final shortlist then for your midfielders, you've got Paul McStay, Neil Lennon, Jim Baxter, Tommy Burns, Trevor Stephen and Paddy Crerand.
I've gone for Jim Baxter.
Okay, so...
Another legend with Rangers, Nathan. One of the most gifted lads I've ever seen. But he had his own way of living. Jimmy was a high liver.
Right.
But he could really play. He was a left-footed guy, a bit like Liam Brady.
Okay.
Oh, elegant on the ball. The Rangers fans loved him. He could hold on to the ball. He could give it, he's real classy player. Could go past people. He didn't score many goals, but he scored a few goals. But on the ball, he was a delight to watch, and the Rangers supporters loved him. But Jimmy didn't have a long career. He broke his leg in a European Cup match, Nathan, and he was never the same again. And they called him Bacardi Jim. That was Jim's name. And apparently, when he was in hospital that night, having broken his leg, the lads went in to see him, and he had his bottle of Bacardi and Coke beside him.
Right.
Ready to go. He was noted for it, Nathan. He was noted, Jim. He was... Actually, Don Reevy was going to see him. He played for Wraith Rovers as a young fella. And Don Reevy had taken over at Leeds, and he went up to see him. And Don had a list, what he did with most players, of, things they didn't do well, or didn't do, or things they did and shouldn't have been doing. And Jimmy, apparently, Don must have called about 10 different things. You did this and you did that. And Jimmy Baxter apparently stopped him. And he said, no, hang on. He says, you got that list there. He says, there's about 20 other items on the list that you don't have. And that was it. Don didn't sign him then.
Right.
But he was a character. But he lived a high life. But when he was fit now, like after he broke his leg, when he came back, he came to Sunderland, and he was never the same player again.
Yeah, it is very sad when you talk about a lot of players of that generation, because at the time it's a broken leg that it can be so severe, whereas nowadays with the right treatment you can make a full recovery. That, like as you say, that his career never recovered really from that broken leg, and he went
down. Never trained, Nathan. So he didn't obviously it was more difficult in those days, but Jim didn't care. You know, he just did what he wanted to do, and he put on weight. He wasn't the same player again, but when he was at his best with Rangers, he was terrific, and he'd be idolised to this day with Rangers supporters. He was absolutely brilliant, but not for long.
Yeah, certainly made an impact during that short spell before he broke his leg in that Rapid Vienna was in a European game. So that's your four midfielders. Then we have Jimmy Johnston, Bobby Murdoch, John Craig and Jim Baxter. It's a heck of a midfield four in this combined Celtic Rangers 11. Let's move on to your forwards then, where again there's no shortage of talent. You have a short list of Mo Johnston, Ralph Brand, Henrik Larsson, John Hartson, Frank McIlvenny, Colin Steen, Robbie Keane and Stevie Chalmers. Henrik Larsson, I think, is the... I'm getting mixed up with it. Yeah, I picked Larsson out there, Nathan. Like, he was a terrific player, as we know. Anybody that remembers seeing him, I'm saying, even his appearances for Celtic, he had 221 appearances and scored 174 goals. Like, this fellow was class, real class. I mean, he had a little spell near the end of his times at Manchester United. Yeah, again, where he scored goals. And even actually after he left Celtic and he went to Barcelona, because, listen, certainly in modern Scottish football, the question when you're playing for Celtic or Rangers is what sort of a test is it when you talk about his goal-scoring record, but went to Barcelona and made a brilliant contribution there as well. So Celtic got a player there who was pretty much at the peak of his powers.
Oh, he's brilliant. He was brilliant, Nathan. You know, I say with Celtic, again, he'd be idolised with the Celtic supporters, the goals he scored. Not just the goals he scored, but the way in which he played. He was a really top class. I think he'd be sensational today, I think. Yeah, Larsson, if he was playing.
As you say, his goal-scoring record overall in all competitions, it was 242 and 315 for Celtic, which is an insane record in modern-day football. But also, technically, he looked like he was a slightly different to your modern forward. He could do it all. He could drop deep. He could contribute to the game in the way that's probably not expected out of a lot of strikers at the moment.
No, well, I think in those days it wasn't, Nathan. They usually had a target man and somebody playing off the target man. But this guy didn't need a target man. He could come deep. He could get on the ball. He had the control, see a pass. He could make goals as well. He was an all-round player, Nathan, that could do that. I mean, a lot of centre forwards in the old days that could score goals, but you'd say, well, not so good on the ground. This fella was. He was good. He was good everywhere.
That was a great Celtic team as well. We haven't really touched on them so far because obviously a lot of this side from a Celtic point of view is coming from that Lisbon Lions team. But the team that Martin O'Neill put together that got to UEFA Cup final with the likes of Cillian Petrov and Alan Thompson and Jackie McNamara and Henrik Larsson, obviously the real star of that team. That was quite an achievement back in 2003 to bring that side all the way to UEFA Cup final.
Oh, definitely. Well, any time, Nathan, to do that was a great time for Martin O'Neill at Celtic. And I think before Martin went, Rangers won the league, or somebody won the league by a big way. And I remember thinking at the time, Martin's going to have a big job there to get that thing. But I think he won the league next year, which was amazing. And having players like Larsson in your side is a big help as well. But you still have to manage them well, Nathan. You know.
Yeah. So Henrik Larsson, the first of your three forwards. Let's go through the second shortlist. Duncan Ferguson, Lou Macari, Kenny Dalglish, Mark Hateley, Brian McClare, Pierre Van Hooijdonk, Brian Laudrup and Willie Wallace.
Well, it has to be Kenny Dalglish. I think Kenny is one of the great players. I think he's a great player for Celtic. He was a great player for Liverpool. I think he was a great player for Scotland. He was just a great player. And I was surprised. I looked up his goal-scoring record at Celtic. He's played 204 games and scored 112 goals for Celtic, Nathan, before he ever came to Liverpool. And you can imagine the amount of assists that Kenny had. That's what made him such a great player. He could score goals, and usually a guy who scores as many goals as he did doesn't make so many. But Kenny did. Like when he was playing with Ian Rush, we remember him playing for Ian Rush, for example, made loads of goals. He was a real all-round player. Kenny could come deep. His technique was good. He could hold it up. He could even score goals, make goals. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Did you play much against Dalglish?
No, I played against him 2 or 3 times. I think I played against him in a friendly match at Celtic. I think I played against him for the League of Ireland team against Liverpool, and maybe another pre-season match when I was at Leeds.
And could you see within those games what it was that made him so great, that he's automatic in a selection like this? He's arguably Liverpool's greatest ever player.
Yeah, he was like, when you're looking at players, Nathan, they have certain things. A big centre forward can score goals. Like Ian Rush was a great goal scorer, in my opinion, a great player. But he couldn't make goals like Dalglish made. He was a finisher. Dalglish scored more than his fair share of goals and made goals, Nathan. So he's a complete player.
Yeah. Could he have played in midfield, or would that have been a waste of him?
He could play. He could play anywhere because his positional sense was very good. Like as a centre forward, like off the front man, he could make time and space for himself, and that's what makes the great players. It's being able to do that, and then they always seem to have plenty of time on the ball. But then he could make them, but he could score them. He was classy, and his control was good. His first control was good. First touch of the ball was good. So he's making time and space for himself all the time, and he made goal scoring look easy. He's just a great player.
Yeah. Making goal scoring look easy, is that just the game slowing down when he got himself into...
No, he slowed the game down.
Okay.
What to say about great players, Nathan? When after the first touch, they've more room than they had before they touched the ball. When you get a bad player, he has less room after touching the ball twice or three times than he had before he touched it.
Yeah, the second touch is a tackle.
Yeah. They what we used to say, bad players with bad control, seems to attract people like bees to honey.
Right.
Whereas Dalglish would with his first touch would look as if he's in a tight area, and after he's touched it once, he's away from him. When he's touched it twice, he's got even more room. Yeah. Time and space, Nate. When you look at a football pitch, you've got 20 individuals vying for space, and the bad players never can make any space, and the great players make it look easy. And that's what Dalglish could do.
Yeah, he certainly was one of the great players, that's for sure. Let's get your final selection then in this all-time combined Celtic Rangers 11. Your shortlist is Charlie Nicholas, Gordon Drury, Chris Sutton, Ali McCoist, Kenny Miller, Rod Wallace and Davy Provan. Who have you gone for?
I've gone for Ali McCoist.
Okay.
Ali McCoist's record, Nathan. He was a pure goal scorer. He wasn't a Dalglish, but when you get a pure goal scorer, they're worth their weight in gold. It's 418 appearances for Rangers, 261 goals, Nathan.
Yeah, it is a heck of a record.
Like, he's now goal scorer. You wouldn't look at him, and he's like the goal scorers that you'd say, where is he for 20 minutes? And he finished up scoring 2 goals. You know that way, Nathan. He was quick, he was bright, and obviously a good finisher. But there'll be games like where a lot of players like him, you wouldn't see that much of him. Like Ronaldo does it on a different level. You know, when you watch a game with Ronaldo, sometimes he's out of it for ages. We finished up scoring 2 goals, 2 or 3 goals in the match. And they don't usually make many goals. Again, I'd like to see the record with Ronaldo. I can see Ronaldo score. I don't see him making many goals, Nathan. But that was McCoist in a lesser way. I don't remember him making many goals. But he was game, he was quick, and he scored more than his fair share.
Yeah, as you say, the goal-scoring record, 4 separate seasons, he scored over 30 league goals. Yeah. So consistently part of that Rangers 9-in-a-row team. And I guess there is a pressure in itself on that type of player, because you say if you're not contributing much else aside from the goals, you've got to get the goals. Yeah,
well, they have a certain temperament to the game. In other words, they can do it. Like, they can wait. Like I know with a lot of players. I was a midfield player myself, and I was out of the game for 10 minutes. I think, God, what is going on? I've got to contribute something. But goal scorers have a different mentality altogether. I think their attitudes couldn't care if I'm out of the game for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, but I'll get a goal, and that's it. You know, like as I said, with at least 1 or 2 other, Messi would be exceptional in that they're in the game making goals as well. But when you have a McCoist, they're always going to get you out of jail. Well, a lot of the times get you out of jail, Nathan, because that's what they can do. They have the temperament to do it.
Yeah, it's funny because he's obviously gone on and had probably successful television career since his time at Rangers, and people know him from a different life right now. You'd almost forget.
Yeah.
He's when that sort of goal-scoring record, he's right up there as one of the great goal scorers of British football.
Yeah, but he'd have that bubbly personality where he wouldn't be technically brilliant, but he'd have the optimistic personality that a lot of goal scorers have to have. In other words, they'd be having a nightmare night for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, but from nowhere, they finish up scoring 2 goals. That's winning the game. They're able to live with themselves, in that particular way, and it's a temperament thing.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Football is back.
Aguero makes it 3. Chelsea switch off at the back.
Like the rest of us returning to work, the Premier League is also back. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. Live updates and analysis of this summer's Premier League action. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Cartilage and bone health are important for keeping the spring in your step. Joint Ace from the nutritional experts at Vitabiotics is uniquely formulated with glucosamine, vitamin C and D and copper to help maintain healthy bones, cartilage and connective tissues. Ideal for maintaining an active lifestyle. Keep a spring in your step with Joint Ace in your local pharmacy, in store and online.
OTB AM.
Welcome back. It is 8:01 on this Friday morning. If you're just joining us, you've missed John Giles' Celtic Rangers 11. Tommy Rooney is with us for the next little while as well. Tommy, how are you getting on?
Owen, how are things? Good morning.
All good. So it was a 6-5 split, very diplomatic from John. Celtic just about edging Rangers in the end. So it was Packy Bonner in goals, Terry Butcher, Billy McNeil, Richard Goff, Jimmy Johnstone, Bobby Murdoch, John Gregg, Jim Baxter, and Henrik Larsson, Kenny Dalglish, Ali McCoist. A 3-4-3, futuristic stuff from John Giles.
Where was Alan Thompson and Didier Gast? That's what I want to know. Look, it's some team when you combine them together. I don't know who your favourite Celtic players were when you were younger, but I really liked that Hartson Sutton combo up front with Larsson. Like, they were just ridiculous, like, together. And they had a pretty decent defence as well. Bubba Balde. Who was the other centre back? Was it Varga? Was Varga the other centre back?
Varga and Balde, I think, would have been of our vintage. The Martin O'Neill era, when Celtic were, I guess, at their greatest, perhaps during our lifetime. I'm not sure if that's controversial or not, given they've just won 1 billion titles in a row. But
true.
I mean, that front three.
Like Van Dijk obviously didn't do enough to make it. No,
and I think his criteria will accept that. I think that's a sensible enough decision. There's no way Van Dijk is the player he is today back at Celtic. He's a great player, but does he get in ahead of some of the names that are there? I'm not sure. They're
exactly
complete and utter legends. It was a good shout though, but like, I mean, you can't have that team.
This is the John Giles 11 though. Yeah, you're right.
It's true, but you can't have that team without Henrik Larsson. He is the one person that this whole thing is moulded around. Like, we had this conversation on the Classic Game Club a few months ago. It's kind of absurd that Henrik Larsson was in the Scottish Premier League for so long. Like, and that's no disrespect to Scottish football, because it was in such a good place when he was there. But even accepting that Scottish football was still an excellent league and much better back then than it is today, it is still kind of mad that Henrik Larsson existed there for so long, that he was more than good enough to be one of the best strikers in the Premier League at that point.
Absolutely. And absolutely. I mean, you're spot on. Like, you saw it in that loan spell. It was really exciting that year, that few months that he went to Manchester United, and he had a spell at Barcelona as well, didn't he? Where he did quite well. Like, but where would he? I suppose, like, that the Scottish League was good back then. Like, where would he have gone? Like, they got to the UEFA Cup final. Is it Serie A? Like, are you saying Premier League? Are you saying he should have gone to the Premier League? Perhaps Chelsea could have splashed money on him when Abramovich first came in. I don't know, but it's interesting that he did stay there that long.
Henrik Larsson would have made a great Liverpool player at around that time.
God, he would, wouldn't he?
So, like, his Celtic era was 97 to 04. Like, in fairness, Barcelona come in straight away after that, and it's kind of post Barcelona where he might have become available before his loan spell with Manchester United. But like,
Liverpool went for Milan Baras that summer in 2004. Obviously, he was top scorer in Euro 2004 that year. So they probably thought they were getting a pretty decent player.
97 to 2004 at Celtic, 221 appearances, 174 goals. Absurd goal scoring record, really. Yeah. And it's kind of crazy that he did stay there for 7 years. I guess it does show you the strength of the SPL at the time. The other thing, Tom, we wanted to chat about this morning, just to kind of whet the appetite a little bit for 9 o'clock, or 10 past 9 anyway this morning, we're going to be getting into Derry's Mount Rushmore. And I found with County Derry, with County Down, and I know you've been doing a lot of work on County Fermanagh for next week as well, with some of these counties in Northern Ireland, there is a lot of interesting storylines that run through that certainly I'll hold my hands up and say I wasn't aware of. And we're going to get a bit of 100%. An education later on. I'm not sure you've been putting together all these Mount Rushmores beforehand, so you've got a fairly good idea of what's going to be coming up later on. But has that been the same for you, the complexities of all of these Mount Rushmores?
Yeah. I've been putting together a lot of them now. And one of my, Fermanagh is actually set to be one of my favourite, and I'm really looking forward to the Derry one later on. And I think it's because, as you said there, we're getting an education in these counties. And I would say that some counties are fairly straightforward. I'd say Meath was probably fairly straightforward. I'd say Kilkenny should have been straightforward. Kerry was pretty straightforward. But when it comes to a county like Derry, I'd actually align them quite closely to Sligo, in the fact that in the town itself, soccer is so important. And it's a little bit like Louth as well. Soccer has such an influence over Derry City. And whether it's with the club, whether it's with Northern Ireland, or it's like Shane Duffy and James McLean switching, Darren Gibson switching to the Republic of Ireland. There's such a strong connection between soccer and Derry that I'm really looking forward to seeing how it's going to be represented later on. We have Chrissy McKaigue involved, who is involved with Schlockneil, and perhaps on a local level, Schlockneil are probably one of the most impressive stories across the whole country. A tiny parish that have done incredible things on a national stage. So, like, outside of that, I'll be honest, with Derry, I'm not fully sure. Outside of Gaelic football, outside of soccer, you've got, a couple of boxing names. I'm not really sure how they're going to get anyone else in that. I'm not sure there's going to be rugby. I'm not sure there's going to be Olympians involved. I don't know. For me, Anthony Tohill has to be on it, but what do I know?
Anthony Tohill has to be on it. I think that's a fairly good teaser/spoiler for later on. I think he's going to be well in with a shout of making the 4 names. It's going to be a good one. It's coming your way at 10 past 9. Let's tell you what else is coming up this morning on OTB AM. Let's give you the full schedule. So at 7 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning, we're going to be getting into football with Phil Egan in just a moment. A brand new slot called Monday's Headlines today. We're basically putting our neck on the line with 5 big predictions for the weekend's Premier League. The sports page is then coming your way at 8:30. Plenty from Jose Mourinho's press conference, plenty from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's press conference, dominating the back pages today. Rugby with Alan Quinlan then at 8:40. It's a fairly precarious time in the situation between the IRFU and Rugby Players Ireland, and with players' contracts and pay cuts. We'll be getting his take on that, and also the fact that rugby is happening at the moment in the Southern Hemisphere. He's been watching a bit of it. Royal Ascot Day 4 then at 9 o'clock with Thom Malone. Big day for Tom yesterday. Big day for you today to see does Thom Malone actually wear the top hat for his racing slot later on. That is the thing that we're all looking forward to, I think. And then Derry's Mount Rushmore coming your way at 10 past 9. So that is how the lay of the land looks over the next hour and 50 minutes or so. But as I say, it's exciting times here. Exciting times for football on a Friday. Phil Egan, you're very welcome to Monday's Headlines today. How are you feeling about this?
Yeah, I think we've probably picked the worst time to try and predict what's going to happen in the Premier League, given that we don't know what's gone on in the last 3 months, if players are in good condition, who's been cheating by not training when they're meant to be at home. They say you can't out-train a bad diet. So it's hard to know. We didn't really learn that much from the other night. One thing, obviously, you're going to see a lot of over the next few weeks is maybe with all the substitutions, games might fizzle out a little bit in the last 20 minutes. I know the City and Arsenal game was pretty much done once. I was going to say David Luiz got sent off, but it was actually pretty much done once he came on.
So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through 5 headlines that haven't happened yet, but are definitely going to happen yet. I want to give you credit here, Phil. I would say that I wrote these headlines if they were bad, but these headlines are actually kind of good. So we'll fess up here. Phil Egan has written all these headlines. So the first one we want to get up here, a headline that's going to appear on Monday morning, is Ole, a lot more to learn. More spelled M-O-U-R.
Yeah.
Phil, what's the story?
Okay, so I think before football was shut down, United were in great form, unbeaten in 11 in all competitions, 9 clean sheets in those. Bruno Fernandes, what a signing. Imagine what it would be like when Paul Pogba comes back and Marcus Rashford. Well, they are back, so surely United are going to be unbelievable. Now, Jose Mourinho, on the other hand, dumped out of the FA Cup, dumped out of the Champions League, no wins in 6, but he basically had no strikers. I mean, Irish fans were crying out for him to play Troy Parrott, and he got some game time in that Norwich FA Cup defeat and obviously missed his penalty. But now Harry Kane's back, Heung-min Son is back, Steven Bergwijn is back, Moussa Sissoko is back. And obviously we know Jose's been training hard in the parks when he shouldn't have been. And everyone's thinking United are going to go to White Hart Lane and win. Jose Mourinho, he's just going to sit in, hit United on the counter-attack. After the game, he'll just say, yeah, Ollie, you know, he's a young manager, but he's got a lot to learn, you know. I've won the Premier League. How many times? He'll hold up the 3 again. And he'll say, you know, when you're managing a club like Manchester United, the pressure is on. And I'm sure Ollie will know that.
Do Manchester United not have a good record in recent months before the lockdown of coming up against a team with the quality of a Tottenham Hotspur and doing quite well?
Oh yeah, when they play the really big teams. But Mourinho was great at telling a big team that they're not a big team. So he'll basically have it in Spurs, the minds of the players tonight, that, you know, you gotta sit in, you gotta defend deep, and we'll hit United on the break. We know United are great at hitting teams on the break, but one thing that they haven't really worked out just yet is how to break teams down. Now that's maybe where Pogba and Fernandes playing together could do that. But I think this is just classic Jose Mourinho. You know, we saw the Manchester City game where, you know, they grounded out. Against Liverpool, they were unlucky not to score on that game, and they were performances which I think you might see something similar this evening. And Mourinho can justify playing like that because he'll say, well, we haven't played for 3 months. Like, what we expect in fast-flowing, attractive, attacking football? No, we got to win because we're 4 points behind United. We win this and we're back in it. And as things stand, 5th place is good enough for Champions League because of City's European ban. So if Spurs win, they're definitely back in it. If United beat them, that's the end of Spurs in terms of trying to finish in the top 5.
How are United going to line up tonight, in your opinion? If you had the cards at your disposal, which way would you play them?
You're obviously going to have Rashford, Martial's going to play, Bruno Fernandes. I don't know will he start Paul Pogba? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he will. And who's going to be the midfielder that does, like, that dynamic midfielder where, you know, Fred was starting to get some form together. McTominay obviously scored that goal against Manchester City as well. So do you play Fred or McTominay? Do you play both of them? Maybe he does go with Pogba, but regardless of what happens, if United don't win, even if Pogba doesn't play, he'll get blamed. We know that.
Graham Souness will be pointing the finger at Paul Pogba, but he wasn't playing, Graham. Doesn't matter. Still didn't do his stuff.
Why wasn't he playing?
Okay, I'm going to have to press you on this. If you had to actually select it now, like if you had to pick with your head, like what situation are you going with? Obviously, Bruno Fernandes starts. You're saying Martial and Rashford start. So is that Fernandes in behind, a 2 up front? Is it a 3 up front with Daniel James and then 2 sitting behind Bruno Fernandes, one of which could be Scott McTominay, the other could be Fred, or it could be Pogba plus one of the other 2? Or, like, if you really had to put your neck on the line?
Yeah, like the 4-2-3-1 looks like the formation you want to pick. So then that would allow you to play Pogba plus 1. So whether it's McTominay or Fred, Matic obviously had started to play pretty well as well, but you got to go Pogba plus 1. Then you play Bruno Fernandes in behind. You have Rashford on the left. You've got that position up for grabs on the right, whether you want to play Daniel James, and then obviously you play Martial up front. And that's, but what we have seen with United in certain games as well this season, that Solskjaer wasn't afraid to go with 3 at the back, which, you know, sometimes can turn into 5 at the back. So that obviously, you know, gives you a bit more solidity in terms of defensive shape. But I'd imagine he'll try and go 4-2-3-1. And then, you know, that's where you can bring Fernandes and Pogba into the same team.
So, Ole, a lot more to learn. That is going to be the headline we're going to see on Monday morning. The second headline we're going to see on Monday morning is a simple one here. Liverpool, too good for Everton, Phil.
Yeah, so I think obviously Liverpool had lost 4 of their 6 games before the break, and there was people saying they were tired, but they actually played unbelievably well against Atletico Madrid. And I still believe if Alisson was playing in goal that night, Liverpool would be still in the Champions League. But that's done now. I can imagine over the last few weeks, Jurgen Klopp has basically lined things up that Liverpool will be ready to hit the ground running, because unlike, say, someone like Manchester City, who will have their eyes on the Champions League, this mini tournament in August, Liverpool don't have that. Liverpool just want to hit the ground running, get the job done, 2 more wins, and they're champions. We know they have a great record against Everton. They haven't lost to Everton since 2010, so you're looking at a decade there. And the headline could be too good, T spelt with 2 O's, or if Liverpool win 2-0, you can put in a WO to substitute it there. But yeah, I think Liverpool will get the job done. And I think of all the big teams returning, I think I'm expecting Liverpool to be the sharpest of them all.
You're an excellent sub-editor, Phil. A great array of options there for anybody listening in who might be putting together a newspaper on Monday morning. You also want to talk about the big viewing opportunity here, the big entertainment prospect that comes with, let's say, a rogue microphone that might be hanging close to the referee.
Yeah, well, obviously you have the option of watching with crowd noise or without. So I personally go for crowd noise, but if you do go without crowd noise, you can pick up what the players and the referee is saying. So who's the referee? Mike Dean. Only the second time he's ever refereed a Merseyside derby, the first actually being the meeting at Anfield earlier this season, because obviously he's local. We know he's a Tranmere fan, but he's got to do this. And Mike Dean, what people seem to forget is while all these footballers were in isolation, so is Mike Dean. Mike Dean is back. He's back this weekend. He's got the Merseyside derby, and he doesn't like people putting it up to him. So he is going to be definitely enforcing social distancing. He will not harangue Mike Dean. If you do, he'll tell you where to go, and maybe we'll pick up a few sound bites of what it's like to be refereed by Mike Dean.
I would watch a comprehensive reality TV show based on the life of Mike Dean. Just the makers of Keeping Up with the Kardashians, just take that production team, move them to Tranmere, and just focus it on Mike Dean and Mike Dean alone.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people would watch that. Didn't he hand out his 100th red card last season? And I honestly thought if they made a DVD of the 100 red cards he gave, I would probably buy it.
Is this a situation, Phil, just one last thing on Liverpool here, where if they wrap things up, Wednesday night, get revenge for Istanbul and all that, and beating Palace to win the league might even be more pleasurable than Everton. Is it a situation where Liverpool then take the foot off the gas and start looking towards next season already, or are they looking for this points record?
Yeah, I'd say the way the fixtures have worked out, they obviously still have to play Chelsea, they have to play Arsenal, but the games that they have coming up and obviously they have to play Manchester City. But, watching Manchester City the other night, if you're Jurgen Klopp, you wouldn't have seen anything that would strike much fear into you. And I said, I think Liverpool will definitely try and finish the season strongly. So if they do get it wrapped up on Wednesday, I think the fact that they can't really celebrate it in the way that they might if it was under normal circumstances. So say, for example, they beat Everton on Sunday and then they beat Crystal Palace next week. If there was a full house at Anfield there, obviously there's a huge party, that spills into Thursday morning, and then you don't know how Liverpool will finish the season out. Maybe they've a few off games or he rotates players, but because of the nature of things and the games are coming thick and fast, and we don't have that ability to be able to socialise. I mean, you can have a small party, whatever, but obviously social distancing and all that. I'd imagine it's just very much get the job done and let's see how many points they can accumulate. So they still have 27 points to go, and they've 109 points is the maximum they can get. So they've a little bit of wiggle room to beat that Manchester City record of 100. So I think that's what they're going for.
Mm-hmm. Headline number 3 on Monday morning, is no joy for Moyes, even without the noise. Great rhyming headline there, Phil. Fair play. What does this mean?
Well, David Moyes, obviously West Ham playing Wolves, and West Ham, Karen Brady was one of the first to kind of talk about null and voiding the season, and I think a lot of people, thought that she had West Ham's interests at heart here. So, some people would think, wouldn't it be ironic if West Ham went down? But they play Wolves, then they've got games against Spurs and Chelsea. So the pressure is on West Ham. And I think this is going to be the game where, obviously, there was a few jokes the other night about Manchester City and how, the atmosphere at the Etihad hadn't changed because, usually it's not full anyway. I think it's going to be even more so the case of people poking fun at the London Stadium tomorrow when they play Wolves, and we know the atmosphere is nowhere near as good there as it was in Upton Park. We know they've had issues there. But one thing that happened when David Moyes was reappointed West Ham manager, it wasn't exactly, he wasn't welcomed back with open arms by the West Ham fans. So, maybe some people might think without fans there, it might take a little bit of pressure off them, but I still think the fact that West Ham are playing Wolves, it's going to be a tough game. Wolves are definitely in with a shout of being one of those clubs that could finish in the Champions League places. So this is not an easy one. And I said, if West Ham lose this, then they start looking at those games against Spurs and Chelsea, and they're running out of games. They're only above the relegation zone on goal difference.
Are they going down?
I don't know. It's hard to know. I think Norwich are gone. I think Norwich are gone. I would worry about Bournemouth. I wasn't overly impressed by Villa the other night. So, you're kind of looking at West Ham, Watford, Brighton are still not safe either. So someone's going to go that you wouldn't have maybe picked at the start of the season, although we do tend to pick Bournemouth at the start of every season, and they always get out of it. But maybe they mightn't get out of it this season.
Headline 4 is Chris still cross with Hawkeye despite taking out Magpies. That is your. How long did that one take?
Not that long now. I was trying to think of something. Like, obviously, my Chris Cross reference, and a claim to fame is I've actually seen Chris Cross live in concert.
Oh, that is a claim to fame.
I know they supported Michael Jackson in Lansdowne Road in 1992. They came on and they made us jump. That's all I can say. But I think if a couple of things could happen. Obviously, Sheffield United were denied that goal by Hawkeye against Villa. So I think if Sheffield United score now, they don't score enough goals for a team that had a chance to go 50 the other night. It's incredible, but the reason they're doing so well is because defensively they don't concede goals. They're the second best defence in the league. But if they do score, I can imagine the celebration. There's a few options for celebrations. Obviously, I think we're going to see a lot of players maybe take a kneel, or they're going to have messages on their T-shirts. But maybe some Sheffield United player might see the funny side of what happened the other night and point to their imaginary watch to make sure that the goal is given. But you can imagine if they win the game, Chris Wilder is asked after it, so, good win for you, Chris. Just think you'd have another 2 points for the other night. And he's like, yeah, it was great to get the win, but I still haven't gotten over what happened the other night.
Do we think that there could be more technological failures? Like we're obviously going to be chatting about VAR at some point this weekend. Do we think that there could be another massive cock-up? I mean, technology shouldn't respond in any way to pressure, but sometimes these things can be like waiting for buses. That there can be a couple of these incidents in cluster.
No, absolutely. Something could happen, like Villa get a goal and it's awarded using goal line technology. Something mad like that could happen. For all we know, Sheffield United could be involved in another incident like that. And it's obviously the Steve Bruce derby. I remember he used to manage Sheffield United. Wasn't he the manager of Sheffield United when they played Arsenal, and the unsporting, you're meant to throw the ball back? Wasn't it Canu that scored that goal where they were throwing the ball back? It was a cup tie. So something strange could happen. But VAR is always in the headlines. So I'd imagine the reason I didn't go out for a Monday headline was because there's so many games over the weekend. You'd need a crystal ball to know where VAR is going to strike.
Well, my technological prediction, before we get into your last headline, my technological prediction for the weekend is that we are going to have some obscenities involved. Now, I don't know how this is going to be. Like, we had a moment in Manchester City against Arsenal where Martin Tyler apologised on behalf of Kevin De Bruyne, which didn't really make any sense. I don't think we could hear what was actually said from Kevin De Bruyne. It will happen this weekend where something ridiculous, where something obscene is picked up vocally But I'm also hopeful that we're going to see some obscenities from those Zoom chats that are going on behind the goals. I mean, the Manchester City supporters were very well behaved at the Etihad last night. I think I've got greater faith in football fans to get to the level, to get to the bar that South Korea set with their blow-up dolls in the crowd. I'm expecting us to get to that level via Zoom, where somebody makes an obscene gesture or something like that and it's picked up a match of the day. That is my hope for this weekend, and I'm pretty confident it's going to happen. And if it can all combine into one, where you have a bit of controversy, where you have Mike Dean slagging somebody off, then it will be all the better, and we can finally get Mike Dean that reality TV show. Right, absolutely. Headline number 5.
Yeah, so,
Vardy, no silent assassin.
No silent assassin. So Vardy is 1 goal shy of 100 Premier League goals. It's been an incredible Premier League career for him, considering he came to it so late. Now, one thing I have always noticed with Jamie Vardy, the more abuse you give Jamie Vardy, the better he seems to play. And that means when he goes away from home, he gets dogs abuse from away fans. You think back to even the whole incident between Rebecca Vardy and Colleen Rooney. And what did Vardy do? He went on a scoring streak, almost to spite everyone. You think, yeah, you can slag me off, you can slag off people in my family, well, I'm going to shut you up by scoring goals. So I wonder, without that needle, what effect that'll have on him. There's a few things to think of with the new way football is at the moment. Even we were talking about the Merseyside derby. Jurgen Klopp hugs players. He can't do that anymore. Like when he's making his substitutions and you put in a shift, Jurgen usually gives you a hug. And I mean, one thing people have missed a lot over the last few weeks is hugs. And if you're not getting a Klopp hug, maybe you won't have the same effect. So I'm wondering, the silence, what kind of effect that will have on Jamie Vardy.
That's it. You've basically discovered the reason why Liverpool's title challenge is going to crumble. A lack of Klopp hugs. That is going to be the thing that crashes this whole house of cards. Just to wrap up then, the 5 headlines that we're going to see, 100% can't be wrong with this on a Monday morning from Phil Egan. Ole, a lot more to learn. Liverpool, too good for Everton. No joy for Moyes, even without the noise. Chris still across with Hawkeye despite taking out Magpies. Bit of a tongue twister that one. And Vardy, no silent assassin. Phil Egan, good stuff. Thanks a million. Enjoy the football. Later today at midday, we're going to be giving you another chance to win €1,000 in our new game show, Know Your Football. The prize fund has been reset after we had our first winner in last week's game, who walked away with a handy €2,000 after answering all 15 questions correctly. You can register at quiz.otbsports.com. That is quiz.otbsports.com. Simply log in there just before 12 o'clock this afternoon to play along. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers, and always gamble responsibly. Right, we've still got plenty to come on the show this morning. The sports pages are up next. But yesterday we told you about an exclusive interview that's available right now only on the OTB Sports app. Brian O'Driscoll in conversation with Irish actor Jamie Dornan. Here they are on Dornan's rugby credentials.
From a rugby point of view, you played a bit of rugby. To a good standard?
What is a good standard? I mean, compared to you, probably not a great standard. But I played an okay standard. I played in the first at Methody, which is a big rugby school, but only in my upper 6th year, not in 5th year or lower 6th. I was nowhere near it either of those years.
Back three on the wing, fullback.
I was out half until upper 6th, and then moved on to the wing when they realised I did the 100 sub 11. So it was, I didn't really have a choice. And also because at 10 I probably ran it too much myself. And they thought maybe give me a bit more space, and Davy Wells, who was our coach, who's sort of iconic figure up in the north, decided to move me onto the wing. And then I
love that you've spun that positively. That's so good. It's always a promotion from 10 to the wing, isn't it?
OTB AM.
29 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning. It is time for the sports pages. We will start with otbsports.com. The homepage this morning, leading with John Giles as ever on a Friday morning. Celtic and Rangers 11. John Giles picks the old firm's finest. It was a 6-5 split in favour of Celtic, that one. So a great day to be a Celtic supporter. Derry's Mt Rushmore, the preview article is up there if you want to whet the appetite for our slot at around 9:10 this morning. We've got Chrissy, McKaigue and Cahair doing Derry's Mt Rushmore. There was also a regular Thursday night football with John Giles last night where there was actual current football to talk about. Mikel Arteta could leave before the summer, he said, which is a fairly grim prospect for Arsenal fans given the job has just started. And he responded to Graham Souness's comments about him earlier this week. Being called a nasty bastard is a compliment. That is John Giles' response to Graham Souness. He's not wrong, and I'm sure Graham Souness did mean it as a compliment as well. And there is the OTB AM article as well. So that is otbsports.com for you this morning. Let's turn to the newspapers then. And the big story on the back of the Irish Independent, which is where we'll start, is Angry Long calls for FAI to be razed to the ground. This is Bohemians manager Keith Long, who isn't always outspoken, who doesn't always come out with big statements, and certainly isn't prone to hyperbole. So this is quite big to hear Keith Long speak in this manner. He was speaking directly to Bohs fans on a live stream, and he said, just to give you a sample, in a message, I should say, to Bohs fans, he said, the game has been abused for far too long and we have regressed at every level. Football in this country is dysfunctional and fractured. We operate in a toxic environment where self-interest and agendas always take precedence. It is arguable that the FAI is a toxic brand and the organisation needs to be razed to the ground and start again. I despair to think what the future holds if we continue on the path we are currently on. The culture has got to change. Radical, meaningful organisational change needs to happen, built on solid foundations and not sand. Very strong stuff there from Keith Long, as you can tell there. And what a week. There hasn't been a dull week in the FAI, unfortunately, for well over a year at this point. And this has been just another seismic week, you feel, where there are a lot of parties coming to the fore now, not happy with how the current regime is running things. And clearly there's a legacy of upset with how the League of Ireland has been treated from the very top tier as well. Crunch IRFU pay talks to stretch into next week. Meanwhile, writes Rory O'Connor, the IRFU and players' representatives will meet again next week on talks on potential pay cuts as they continue the possibility of 20% pay cuts beyond COVID-19 for players in Ireland. Not good news from Rugby Players Ireland perspective, to say the least. And then the other stories in the Irish Independent, Ole must pick right man to complement his dream duo Pogba and Fernandes. Harbinson says league restart a big boost for the lower league teams, and I just wasn't committed today, says Rory McIlroy, responding to yesterday's performance. The Irish Examiner then leads with Jose Mourinho. Lockdown does little to affect Mourinho's mojo. So he was chatting about plenty of things yesterday. He was saying that Dele Alli's ban is too harsh. He says that there is a double standard there. He said that he was only fixing the battery or fixing the GPS on Tanguy and Ndombele when they met in the park. And he says that those images that you saw during lockdown of Jose Mourinho in a park in London, they were not him actually training with his players. They were actually championship players that he stopped and had the chats with, and he kept a safe social distance with. But he still said sorry, and he said he was wrong to do that. But plenty from Jose Mourinho's comments yesterday, and it kind of stirs the pot nicely for Spurs against Manchester United tonight. Kenny Hale's injury-free McCarthy as an exceptional talent. Meanwhile, there's a story on Ireland, and financial constraints may lead Luiz to exit, as we've been speaking about on the show. David Luiz's future at Arsenal in a very precarious position at the moment. And then the lead from Solskjaer and his press conference yesterday is that he's expecting to see Pogba back to his best. So that is the Irish Examiner this morning. And we will move on to another paper who led with Jose Mourinho, which is The Guardian. Double standards. Mourinho hits out at FA's contradictions over Ali ban. I feel very, very sorry that Dele is not playing. It is quite unfair. I'm not sure if everybody will agree with that, to be quite honest with you, Jose. I think in terms of the actual incident in question, I think even Dele Alli this week has come out and said that he was screwed over by a mate of his, didn't exactly come to defend what he had done. Third Symphony, meanwhile, Stradivarius delights the Tory in search to Ascot Gold Cup treble. Won his third in a row yesterday, an incredible horse, Stradivarius, and we will get Thom Malone's take on that. The only person really who had a better day than Stradivarius yesterday was Thom Malone. RFU may urge England fans to stop singing Swing Low. RFU conducting a review into the song, and that is the latest in the discussion after England supporters have been criticised by academics for cross-cultural appropriation of a US slave song. Nigel Walker, meanwhile, says British sport is not racist, but we have turned a blind eye. And Paul Stewart says, speaking openly about abuse made me feel less alone. So that is The Guardian this morning. The Daily Telegraph also leads with a photograph And the same story, the photograph is of the age of Stradivarius. The Tory wins Gold Cup for third time in a row on all-time great. An all-time great is certainly how that horse might have been viewed before yesterday, but that legacy is in no question whatsoever after that performance in yesterday's Gold Cup. The main story, as I said, Mourinho has swiped at FA over Ali Ban. Penalty for mocking Asian man on social media unfair, he says. Tottenham manager admits to his own very small mistake. A couple of other stories then on the front of the Daily Telegraph. Gatland's final Lions plea for Premiership rethink. This is with regards to the next Lions tour and how the Premiership finals may actually overlap with the preparations for the Lions tour to South Africa. Club players could be lost to golf, warns Michael Vaughan, and Hull comes up roses with a stunning playoff finish. That is the Daily Telegraph for you this morning. Next up, the Irish Times. Moving back to Solskjaer, happy Pogba can show his class at last. Mourinho accuses football authorities of double standards over Ali's ban. Jacob Steinberg, meanwhile, is writing about the Timo Werner signing. A strong signal of Chelsea's intent, goes the headline. The German striker's arrival will add to Blues' cutting edge. No plans to reconfigure goal line technology despite a failure, meanwhile. That is the latest on the ghost goal from 2 nights ago. And rugby's nearly back, and I'm as excited as a kid again. This is Andrew Porter, who's been doing a few columns for the Irish Times. Rashford is the lead photograph on the back of the Mirror this morning. Captain, leader, legend. Ole says we're so proud of Marcus and the way he's changed young lives. He's such a natural who is likely to skipper United and England. And I don't think too many people would disagree with him on that. One lamp or two, meanwhile. Timo deal done and Blues set to buy Kai. If they manage to follow up Timo Werner with the Kai Havertz signing, and Chelsea surely are manoeuvring themselves into a very, very strong position for next season, especially with a maturing squad that obviously was affected a little bit by youth and a lack of coherence perhaps at times this season. You've also got a racing pullout, your number one racing pullout, Royal Ascot. Threezy Rider is their headline inside on Stradivarius yesterday, and Happy as Larry with knockout style GAA. The Sun this morning, the Irish Sun. Red, fight and blues. Ole says we want to see the French bullpog. So Marcus Rashford, Paul Pogba, the two main topics of conversation yesterday in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's first press conference of the resumed season. Jose slams Delhi ban, as I've mentioned. Arts O's blast is the other headline here. Mikel Arteta warned Mesut Ozil he must deliver pre-lockdown form before being picked again. And Carabao, UEFA have effectively killed off next season's Carabao Cup by making it impossible for the Premier League's European teams to take part. The Irish News is next up, because they're also leading with that Solskjaer story. Solskjaer and Rashford, we're immensely proud of him, he says. Tonight it's an 8:15 kickoff. No imminent downward turn for McPartland, you can see up there at the top. But the main story on the GEA and the Irish News is that clubs are openly flouting GEA guidelines on group training. This is a story by Andy Waters, who has published information from an Armagh club player who contacted the Irish News to claim that the GEA's COVID-19 return schedule in the county is a shambles. So they're openly flouting the guidelines, as you can tell. The player did not want to be identified. And he says the player, who did not wish to be named, told how there was pressure put on players to get involved in a training session this week involving his club's entire 30-man squad, despite him having a high-risk relative. So that's an interesting line there from the Irish News this morning. The Star then, meanwhile, continues with this Manchester United theme. Poggy in the middle. Ole, we can fight for title with Paul. So he's not holding back on the importance of Paul Pogba to the next couple of months for Manchester United and for the start of next season. Ireland fans face Euro KO and have a go for Kai is the latest on Kai Havertz. The Herald then, Ole says we trust in Pog, or in Pog we trust even. You've got that Keith Long story as well, branding the FAI toxic and GEA to have a rethink on Leinster draw. Next up is the back of the Racing Post. United they stand, inform Red Devils to pick up where they left off before season suspension. The front of the Racing Post is Strad the Magnificent. Sensational Stradivarius joins the Immortals as Frankie partners him to Gold Cup hat-trick. The Irish Daily Mail then, Hawk downed. Refs baffled by excuses given for tech failure. That is with regards to the Sheffield United goal. Stradivarius reigns supreme. The Pro 14 final is set to switch from Cardiff to Dublin. And there's a column inside it. The GEA have lost their way on recovery roadmap and need to open up. The London Times then, finally for me, in terms of the papers, is that Froome set to quit Ineos for Israeli team. This is a very interesting story. Chris Froome hasn't ridden competitively since that terrible injury he got last summer. He's 35 years old at this point, and he is now being linked to an Israel-based team. Will become obviously a tour contender immediately. It's Israel's startup nation, and he would be on a salary of about £5 million. Whether or not Ineos will try and come up with a big counter-offer remains to be seen. They've got Egan Bernal, they've got Grant Thomas, of course, former tour winner, last year's tour winner. So whether or not they will actually come in with a bigger offer remains to be seen. From the tone of the piece here, it looks like this deal with this Israeli team could be legitimate and could be something that we could see Chris Froome donning new team colours whenever we see Tour de France return to our screens. No top 7 in League Cup. Meanwhile, the League Cup faces the prospect of being played without 7 Premier League sides, and Grealish car crash charged. He's been charged with 2 driving offences in relation to a car crash he was involved in after the flouted lockdown protocols. Right, let's have a look at the latest from the OTB Sports app as well. You can download it right now from the App Store, or if you're on Android, it's on the Google Play Store. When you open the app, it lands on the feed, which is your homepage with all the latest news and features. You can listen to OTB Sports Radio all day long in the radio tab. There's also the latest video and also the latest OTB Podcast Network stuff, where you'll get every single one of our podcasts and you can subscribe to your favourite series. So that's the OTB Sports app this morning. That is the sports pages this morning. Alan Quinlan is with us now. Good morning to you, Alan.
Morning, Owen. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thanks. A couple of interesting things to talk about this week, Alan, and it's a story that was developing earlier in the week. It's a story that's carried on the back of the Irish Independent this morning, that the IRFU and Rugby Players Ireland are going to meet again next week to discuss potential pay cuts. Rugby Players Ireland is disappointed to hear about the proposed pay cuts of €20,000, or sorry, not €20,000, 20%. The 20% pay cuts is what I meant to say. This is precarious enough times, isn't it, to be a rugby player, to be involved in the IRFU, because there is a huge degree of uncertainty, first of all, about this whole thing and what is going to happen.
Yeah, there is. I think, obviously, the statement came out from Rugby Players Ireland last weekend. The IRFU proposed these pay cuts right across their non-playing staff and players, and I think it was inevitable. It had to happen. There was pay deferrals in March at the start of this pandemic, which were all agreed. I think ultimately the RFU are losing up to €1 million a month, and they just can't keep going with the way they're going. They've got to put in some long-term plans, and that will require pay cuts right across the board to save money. They're still going to lose a lot of money. I think, with no real sight of fans going into games and the turnstiles clicking open again, I think they're going to have to weather the storm for a long time. And part of that is pay cuts. And we've seen it in so many sporting organisations right across the world where people have to take pay cuts. So with respect to the players, I think, and I was just thinking, if I was a player in the same situation, I think they know it's going to happen, and they've got it will be agreed. But I think, the statement that was released last weekend was one of, we should have been consulted first, and it's nothing should have been released to the press before it was all agreed. But ultimately, it's going to happen on, and that's just the reality of it. And it's going to affect people at different levels, but they've got to take it on the chin, and that's just the reality of it. I think it's been more positive this week. 2 people from the RFU met 2 representatives from Rugby Players Ireland to try and trash out a deal. But it's a much more positive situation than it was last week. Tensions were pretty high, and I suppose that's always going to be the case in any sort of negotiations. And they're going to meet next week again to try and trash out a deal and agree that potential 20% pay cut right across the board for the players.
A non-playing staff could be reduced to 4-day weeks is another potential line here. It does paint a picture that, like as you say, until you get people back in through the turnstiles, until the cash is flowing again within the organisation, it's going to be very, very hard to reach those same levels that were achieved beforehand if you've got non-playing staff that aren't working as much as
and I think the non-playing staff are going to be reduced to a 4-day week, and Rugby Players Ireland are arguing that, you can't, reducing the players. They can't just take a day off and just do 4 days. Their job is pretty much all consuming. It can be, I know you have certain breaks throughout the week, and you could have a day off during the week, but you're working at the weekend if you're playing matches. So I think that's where the argument. But look, ultimately this will get agreed. They've got to accept pay cuts, and that's just where it's at. The RFU can keep, and they fund all the provinces as well, and if the RFU get into financial difficulties, that will trickle right down into the provinces and the funding of the game here in Ireland. So it's just a reality that players are going to have to accept, and I'm sure they will accept it. I'm sure Simon Keogh of Rugby Players Ireland will be formulating plans and to the forefront of those negotiations with the RFU. So there's a bit of pain that's going to have to be accepted here right across the board for everyone.
How important is it that these pay cuts are restored and that I guess the rugby economy bounces back as quickly as possible from this? Because we've already been in a situation in this country where the promise of playing Ireland is what kept the top players in this country. We obviously had people who wanted to go and earn more money abroad, and the payoff was that they wouldn't play for Ireland. If there is an increasing disparity between Irish wages and Premiership or top 14 wages, could that potentially have a terrible legacy really on those who will actually stay and play rugby in Ireland?
Well, like I said, the international game funds the rugby programs here in Ireland, funds the provinces. So the RFU got to protect that. And until international rugby comes back with fans, with the sponsors, with the hospitality, all that stuff that generates the funds on a big Six Nations Day or a test window in November, until that comes back, I think nobody will know, because it's just very, very uncertain ground where all this will end up. Philip Brown did say a couple of weeks ago that, of course, there's a potential that players may, when it comes up to the next round of contracts, who knows where we're going to be in 12 months. And this financial hit that the RFU taken the last few months and will take for the next little while is going to be around for a while. They've got to recalibrate their financial situation and hopefully get back on track and earn money again, like any businesses, I think. So it's a business model that's losing money at the moment. They need to generate funds again, and I think it will be reflected in the next rounds of contract talks, particularly with the top earners who command figures of up to €500,000, 600,000, 700,000 euro a year. The top earners in Ireland get now. That's still a little bit lower than possibly what you get in France, the money that's been thrown around in France. But, I was speaking to Ron O'Gara last week about this. The clubs in France are taking a financial hit as well, but a lot of the clubs there are owned by individuals who are millionaires, billionaires in some cases, and they can weather the storm, if you like. And you just look at Leon announcing the signing of Isaac Rodda, the Australian international, who left the Reds in not so nice circumstances recently over pay cuts there. He had an argument over his salary there, and suddenly he's going to Lyon at the start in September. So the financial clout of the French clubs will always be there, and possibly some of the Premiership clubs, and that's going to pose a risk for some of the internationals going forward. If this situation gets fixed and international rugby comes back in the Six Nations, the Italy-France game is played, the TV money will come through to the RFU, their allocation. November internationals, which generates a lot of money, not just for the RFU, but for the local economy in Dublin as well, and in Ireland with people coming in. But there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainties around that yet on. So hopefully they can get back on track. But like I say, in the short term, the players are going to have to take pay cuts. They have taken pay deferrals, but the pay cuts are going to come in now, and they could last for 12 months. They could last for 2 years. Who knows? Yeah, and I guess when it comes to those centralised contracts, the RFU want to be in as good a negotiating position as possible come next year, and hopefully by then people will be coming through the turnstiles and they'll at least be able to restore the pay cuts, if nothing else. We should chat about some of the rugby that's actually been happening. I think you've been watching some of the action we've seen from the Southern Hemisphere. It kind of it goes up a notch this weekend, I think, with a bit more from
next month from Australia coming back into gear from the 3rd of July. But we've obviously been watching the Super Rugby from New Zealand anyway. It's been pretty good, Alan. It's not exactly the worst product. It's actually something we should be watching a hell of a lot more of, even when we have a full slate of sport available.
Yeah, I think it was strange seeing live rugby last weekend with crowds in New Zealand. It was fantastic to see. I think a couple of the games were on very early, but they were repeated on Sky later in the morning. And we saw the drama of Warren Gatland's son getting a late drop goal to beat his side, the Chiefs. Bryn Gatland came off the bench for the Highlanders, and they beat the Chiefs right at the death. So there was brilliant, great drama there. I spoke to Jason Holland last Friday. His Hurricanes side, former Munster player Jason Holland, his Hurricane side went to Auckland, and they played in front of a record crowd in Eden Park, which is crazy for a Super Rugby match. They do struggle a little bit sometimes to get the massive crowds there that we get here. We're blessed at times in Ireland when we have club games here. The crowds that go, but they struggle a little bit, the Hurricanes against the Blues in Eden Park. But it's just incredible when you look on. I think without naming names and going through all the teams that have played, the 4 teams that played last weekend, the Crusaders had a weekend off. You just see the array of talent, the power, the pace, the speed, and it was interesting. Eddie Jones was interviewed on Sky TV, New Zealand Sky rugby program last week, and they asked him about the young players coming through, and he told them that they've the best academies in the world, Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. So it wasn't taken very nicely, I don't think. But look, they have incredible players. There's just a conveyor belt of players coming through, and watching the Super Rugby last weekend for me was just to see the talent, the young players coming through, that they have names that we haven't heard about, some names that are recognisable from the All Blacks. Bowden Barrett was the big talking point, him playing with the Blues last weekend, his move from the Hurricanes and playing against his former team, which was, I asked Jason Holland about that. What happened? How did it come about that someone who's embedded in the Hurricanes franchise and for so long, his brother plays there, Geordie as well. The other brother, Scott, plays in the Crusaders. But how a player can leave like that, that'd be like back in the day, Brian O'Driscoll coming signing for Munster, or Ronan O'Gara going signing for Leinster. It was that big a deal in New Zealand, and so he didn't. The Hurricanes were trying to keep their composure with him last week. He had a couple of scuffles with Dane Coles, but it was brilliant to watch. One of the big issues around the 2 games last weekend was the breakdown, the amount of penalties and the new directives around. They're not law changes, but new directives about players rolling away much quicker and less of a contest for the ball, and trying to speed up the game. But there was so many penalties in the 4 games last weekend. It was frustrating. It was a lot of stop-start stuff that was in it. But there's 2 good games this weekend. The Chiefs play the Blues and the Hurricanes play the Crusaders. So certainly something to whet the rugby appetite at the moment. And we've been starved of rugby, but certainly the quality and the talent of some of the players there is phenomenal.
It's outrageous. You just look at the 4 teams involved this weekend. It's outrageous. And I'm sure you saw it last weekend when the camera pans to Dan Carter and Tanu Umaga as water boys. It's probably going to be a little bit longer before we see Carter involved with the Blues, but that is something to save for when it does eventually happen, because I know he got neck surgery last year and they're obviously in good shape, so they don't necessarily need him right now.
No, they don't. I think Atira Weir last week played brilliantly for the Blues at out half, and Barrett was at full back, so they're not short at out fly half options. But having someone like Carter back within the group, and I think the Blues have been an underperforming group for a number of years, and I think they look like that. I know it's still very, very early, but they look strong last weekend, and a lot of good players coming through. And having someone like Carter come back into the group, bringing his experience, will only benefit them. How many games will he play? How often will he be involved? But it's a short-term stint for him. But I think it's brilliant to get someone with that kind of experience and quality back into their group.
For sure. Next Monday as well, Alan, before we let you go, there's a new series for OTB Sports launching. It's How's the Head? It's going to be available exclusively on the OTB Sports app, which you can download right now. This has been something you've been working on for the last little while, Alan. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, I just had an idea on it wasn't to do an Alan Quinlan podcast. It was just literally how intriguing it would be just to chat to some people, how they were dealing with the lockdown, and not just in Ireland but in across in New Zealand. When I spoke to John Kerwin, and he's someone that inspired me a lot in helping me a little bit with some challenges I had around my mental health and stuff. He's an All Black legend, but what he's done for mental health in New Zealand, setting up a foundation and been very open and honest about his own challenges, always intrigued me. So I wanted to just try and chat to a few people, see how they were dealing with it and what kind of advice they would have in their own story. It wasn't solely about mental health, because I spoke to Pat Short about how he was dealing, what life would be like for him, with social distancing, him being an actor, a performer, how would he deal with that? And Danny O'Reilly from the Coronas as well, how would the music industry be affected? So we did a couple. We have a couple of more podcasts to come out, but I think the first one with John Kerwin is certainly something that, aside from my involvement in it, something that really intrigued me and always intrigues me. He's a very inspiring person who, speaks so sensibly and well, and has done so much around mental health, not just in New Zealand, but throughout the world. So I really loved having a chat with him, and I just found it really, really interesting every time I speak to him. So, we're going to put him out next week. We've been a couple of weeks just holding off, and hopefully they get a good reaction, I think. And hopefully, certainly the John Kerwin one, I think will certainly help people.
How did John Kerwin help you?
I think sometimes people say to me about mental health, and when I kind of spoke out a little bit, and obviously when you're a professional athlete and there's people, when I put stuff in my book about my mental health and the challenges I would have had, and how I didn't have a lot of understanding about how to look after my mental health and what it was all about, people would come up to me and say, look, that's helped me, and it's given me the confidence to go and see my GP or make some sort of a lifestyle change or speak to a family member or stuff. And I always found that very humbling and really nice that you may have an effect on someone. John Kerwin had a similar effect to me, because I read his book, and here was a guy who was a superstar New Zealand rugby player. He was a god. He was a try scorer. He was good looking. He was tall. He was handsome. He was had the world at his feet, and he was a superstar in New Zealand. And he wanted to end his life a lot of the time, and he put a lot of time and effort into hiding that kind of internal trauma, if you like. So hearing his story about how he, spoke about that and kind of took that weight off his shoulders, and he makes a point that New Zealand were playing Argentina one time in Buenos Aires, I think, and he was looking out the window the morning of the test match, and he wanted to jump out the window. He didn't want to play the test match, and that's phenomenal to be in that situation, that you're playing sport, you're a star, you're playing for the All Blacks, and you feel like jumping out the window off a balcony, not going playing a match for your country. And he was a pin-up boy in New Zealand. So I think it was really, I've spoken to him many times, and he's inspired me to say, well, because I met him a few times and had chats, that there is a better way to feel. If you have depression or a mental health problem, it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to drag you down for the rest of your life. You can actually live with it in a positive way and be open about it, and that's what he does. So if you met John Kerwin, and I would say this to anybody who's ever meets John Kerwin, he radiates positivity, which doesn't really make sense to somebody if they don't understand what I mean. But for someone who has a pretty heavy mental health problem, is very open about it. He's a very, very positive person, and he's a very positive person to be around. And really, he says that's because he's taking this weight off his shoulders, and he's open about it. He's not anyway ashamed about it like he used to be, putting all the time and effort into hiding it. So that's how he's helped me, really, to say that it is okay to kind of have a mental health problem and still live a pretty positive life.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds fantastic, Alan. That interview is coming up on Monday with John Giles. Just download the app and click on the radio tab at 12 o'clock to listen to OTB Sports Radio. Alan, enjoy the rugby from the Southern Hemisphere over the course of the weekend. We'll chat to you next week. Good luck.
Cheers, Owen. Thanks.
Alan Quinlan there on the line. Right, let's tell you what's coming up next. We'll get to Thom Malone in just a moment, who's going to be giving you your tips for the next day of Royal Ascot. He had a stunning day yesterday, but before that, if you are one of those people missing your dose of gridiron news, game reaction and analysis, be sure to sign up to our American football newsletter, OTB Club Gridiron. We've got the latest off-season American football news from both Ireland and America from offtheball.com, as well as podcasts and long and short form video content all included. You can subscribe at offtheball.com/Club Gridiron. That's offtheball.com/Club Gridiron, and enjoy all that OTB Club Gridiron has to offer. Now, plenty coming up in the next hour on OTB AM. There's Derry's Mt Rushmore, and as I say, day 4 of Royal Ascot with Thom Malone is next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Looking for a football show with a bit of a twist?
So I know the likes of Griezmann's big into his fashion.
He wanted a lot. One question he actually asked me was, could he make his studs light up when he runs?
Team 33, the football magazine show for the football purists.
Yeah, the Nike Mercurials from 1998. If you just show that boot to an entire generation of people, and they just get instantly nostalgic and remember everything from that era.
The very best interviews with the cult heroes of the past, and a look at the cultural side of football. Team 33, live at 9 p.m. every Friday on OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Missing this?
Salah takes the shot. Oh, Mo Salah with one of the goals of the season. Unbelievable.
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
All right, later today at 12 o'clock, we'll be giving you another chance to win €1,000 in our new game show, Know Your Football. The prize fund has been reset after we had our first winner in last week's game, who walked away with a handy €2,000 after answering all 15 questions correctly. You can register at quiz.otbsports.com. That is quiz.otbsports.com. Simply log in there before 12 noon today to play along. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers, and always gamble responsibly. Thom Malone, come on in.
Hi, Owen. How are you?
Very well. There's a bit of a delay on my video here, so I am waiting to see. Oh, there you go. Suited and booted again for day 4.
Yeah,
but you can hear the kind of disappointment in my voice because there's no top hat.
No, there's no top hat, Owen, but in honour of John Gosden and Stradivarius yesterday, I do have a John Gosden special, which is exactly like his trilogy, so I'm going to start with that. I've no... Yeah, and this is what John Gosden was wearing yesterday. So it was good enough for him, Frankie Dettori and Stradivarius, who was absolutely incredible yesterday. Then I'm going to start with that, although it does look a little ridiculous.
Yeah, you have officially elevated yourself to the best dressed moment in the history of OTB there when you had the hat on. I would say keep it on because we may as well keep the classiness going, because if anybody was following your tips yesterday, Tom, they wouldn't have had too bad a day at Royal Ascot.
No, it was pretty good. I couldn't actually believe the price about Stradivarius. He was returned 10 to 11, which was pretty good going. Happy with that. Battleground won as well. And then we saved the best for last. Onassis, Hayley Turner, Charlie Fellows, 33 to 1. And there was actually never a moment's doubt in the Sandringham, the last race in the card yesterday. She was really easy to pick out. About a furlong from home, she was absolutely cantering at the back of the field, and you could see everything else was hard at work. And Hayley just kind of one of the very few horses who came kind of to the far side more than the stand side over the course of the day, and she ate them. And brilliant win for Hayley Turner, only her second Royal Ascot winner after she had a winner last year as well. But yeah, I was pretty happy as well with the 33-1 winner, to be honest.
How good was Stradivarius?
Stradivarius was exceptional, and there wasn't too many moments doubt if you'd backed him as well. The pace of the race seemed relatively even, particularly the middle part. Frankie Dettori got a little low in the saddle about a mile from home, and I thought maybe he wasn't happy with his position. But then we got to the last mile, and I've never seen a horse do it so easy. Frankie Dettori was worried about a horse called Technician, who's ready to go on the softened ground. And about 6 furlongs from home, Frankie Dettori was actually just craning his neck, looking at everything behind him. So like 6 furlongs out, he was thinking, I've got this. He knew he'd everything in front of him covered, looked around, got to the 3-pole, did the same again. And then the horse just absolutely sluiced up. Won 10 lengths in the end. Frankie Dettori was standing up in his irons after the furlong pole, waving to the non-existent crowd. But it was a very, very straightforward performance. But it was really breathtaking stuff from Stradivarius, who follows the likes of Nayef and Yates. And obviously Yates won 4, but to win 3 straight Gold Cups is pretty impressive.
So we're looking at the Commonwealth Cup today, Tom.
Yeah, Commonwealth Cup is the main race of the afternoon. See, Aidan O'Brien trained Lope Fernandez is now taking over favouritism. Pierre Lapin then is up near the top of the market as well. Roger Varian had a brilliant day yesterday. 3 winners for him. I kind of like one, though, from the Jessica Harrington yard called Mill Isle. Fillies have won this in the past before, by Star Spangled Banner. I think having a prep run is going to be really handy on a day like today, particularly in these races. She had a prep run in the Guineas. It didn't work out for her. She just didn't seem to get home. Finished 7th after being prominent throughout. So looks like she hasn't lost her pace. And around about 10-1, wouldn't be surprised if she gives Jessica Harrington, who also won't be in attendance, obviously, because it's in the UK, but she's not allowed to go racing either due to her age, unfortunately. But Mill Isle, around a 10-1 shot for the feature race, the Commonwealth Cup.
Very good, Mill Isle. So the tip for the big one. What else are we looking at today?
Yeah, the rest of the card is tricky. They open with a kind of strange 5 furlong handicap. And one I like in this is a horse called, again, this is one of these don't go crazy races, but a horse called Golden Dragon, who's a nice 2-year-old. Like Mill Isle, also by Star Spangled Banner. So assuming he's progressed a little bit, he was an eye-catching 5th in a Group 3 at the back end of last season. I saw him a small enough yard called Stuart Williams. But they have had a couple of winners in the last 10 days, which is always positive. So Golden Dragon is one in the first, around about 14-1. So a little each way play there in the opening race of the day. There's 2, remember we mentioned the change in schedule earlier. So there's back-to-back 2-year-old races then after that. You got the Albany Stakes and the Norfolk Stakes back-to-back, which is really, really strange because of the fillies first. But one I like in this is a horse, number 10 on your card, Sitarhe, who's trained by Roger Varian, whose horses are absolutely flying, was a really impressive winner on debut. This filly by Footsteps in the Sand was an expensive 2-year-old as well. Look, ran a nice time, as they say. You can't define too much by times, but a slow horse can't run a fast time. So we'll stick with Sitarhe, even though I can't really pronounce it. In the Norfolk then that follows that's at 2:25 There's a horse called the Learjet. Was very inexpensive as a juvenile, but it was really, really impressive on his only start to date. Has since been bought by Qatar Racing, and that's why he ends up here. Michael Bell hasn't had the greatest run of form of late. He's actually only sending 3 horses to Royal Ascot. Remember, he trained Big Orange to win a Gold Cup a couple of years ago, but things have been a little quiet for him. The Learjet was actually his last winner as well when he won 16 days ago. But I think the Learjet, again, at a bit of a price because Eye of Heaven is an obvious favourite at 7-4. I'd just be opposing. He's just very short. Lipizzano has been slightly disappointing in his American pedigrees against him. So around 6-1. Again, good times for that 2-year-old, the Learjet. So I'd be with him. Elsewhere in the card, you got the likes of the Hardwick Stakes. Looks an absolute bang match between Ellercam and Anthony Van Dyke. There's not a massive amount between them. I'll probably just side marginally with Anthony Van Dyke. Although, if Ellercam was to win that, it's not a massive selection either way. And then the closing 2 races on the card, you've got the Queen's Vase and the Duke of Edinburgh. In the Queen's Vase, a horse I like there, number 2 in your card, Berkshire Rocco. But it's a very, very, it's not the kind of race that I'd really be going ballistic about. But I do like the chance of Berkshire Rocco having finished second to a really nice Derby sort last time out. And the last race on the card is the Duke of Edinburgh. Oh yeah, one I like here is that horse called West End Charmer. This could be one of my best bets of the day. Actually, West End Charmer. I can't believe he's 6.5 to 1. Really, really impressive winner last time out after having a long break. Only gets a £4 penalty for that. Couldn't have been more impressive. Stable won the race last year as well. Not a big owner, so that suggests this is much more of a big time plan. So yeah, to close out the card, I'll definitely with West End Charmer. He'll be one of the better bets of the day on Friday.
Very good. Great stuff all week, Tom. Thanks a million for that. Congratulations on the great tips yesterday, but more importantly, congratulations on the great hat. Thom Malone there,
Thanks,
enjoying Royal Ascot every day. Ger Lyons is coming up on Friday night racing. If you can't wait till the radio tonight, that goes out at 3 o'clock this afternoon on the OTB Sports app for your Friday afternoon racing, if you will. But Friday night racing, 8 o'clock tonight on Off the Ball, and every single Friday. Ger Lyons, a great guest. Right, we want to tell you about a really important event that's happening this weekend, and you can get involved in it. So this Saturday is World Refugee Day, and we're asking you to stand with refugees alongside some of Ireland's top sports stars, who are inviting people to stand with refugees and join a social distancing exercise class this Saturday, the 20th of June. Sports stars including Tom Barr, Ciara McGeehan, Patience Jumbogula, Sonia O'Sullivan and Brian Fenton are calling on everyone to stretch, squat and plank in a special online class with Olympic rower Claire Lamb, the 10th such class organised during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's an initiative that's been organised by Sanctuary Runners, Sport Against Racism Ireland and the UN Refugee Agency. Everyone can make a difference, every action counts, everyone counts. You can join the class at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning by searching for Sanctuary Runners on YouTube. And you can set a reminder for yourself on their scheduled live video, and you'll be able to see that now on screen. So make sure to check that out tomorrow. Okay, it is time to bring you the latest of our Mount Rushmore series. Cahair O'Kane and Chrissy McKaigue are joining us next on OTB AM for the Mount Rushmore of County Derry.
I'm not worried about it. I can stand over this. Cora Staunton, Lee McHale, Kevin Kilban and Kieran MacDonald.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
Okay, it is time for Derry's Mount Rushmore. We've got Chrissy McKaigue, footballer and hurler for Schlockneil and Derry, and Cahair O'Kane of the Irish News with us. Lads, you're very welcome. How are things?
Ivado and yourself?
All good. Cahair, we might start with you. How are you, Chrissy? Cahair, we might start with you just to get a general overview of the sports identity of County Derry, and without giving anything away, just how broad the range of sports that we might be chatting about today is.
It's broad, but it's narrow. It's probably, you can delve into a load of different things, but really in terms of major identity, it probably comes down to two things: is GAA and soccer. There is a history of boxing as well, bits and pieces, but beyond that, there's nothing. There's none of the sports that are hugely significant, and even the GAA soccer divide. Rarely, you move from geographically, you're talking from outside Derry City the whole way to Lough Neagh. It is GAA country, in terms of the nationalist population. The city is still very much a soccer city, and as a massive proportion of our population is from the city, a massive proportion of the nationalist population is in the city, and yet a very small percentage of that still truly and properly engages with Gaelic games. And as we know, there are strides being made, there are efforts being made, they have been made over generations in various different ways, and there are small seeds coming out of that, but by and large, I don't think anybody could deny it is still a soccer city. And so you have two very kind of defined areas within the county that are very distinctly different.
Right. Very interesting. Chrissy, again, without revealing any of your picks, and I've seen your list, if you were to be picking today, you're not going to stick with GAA here at all. You're actually going to broaden the picks quite substantially, actually.
Yeah, look, it will be too easy for me and Cahair, GAA people to just have picked GAA people, and the list that I've gone with has gone by their legacy on and off their sport environments, and also I suppose I've tried to balance the list a wee bit because like I said before, it just would have been too easy just to go for 3 out of the 4 or 4 out of the 4 people that were GA people, you know.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you've already nailed down a criteria as well. I find sometimes with these lists there can be a criteria that you want to follow, but it could be one rule for one person, one rule for the other. So we haven't exactly nailed that down. We never have given any specific rules, but the general outline for how this will work is that Cahair is going to be the OTB selector. So he's going to give his 4 names on his Mount Rushmore, and then Chrissy is the OTB challenger. Chrissy will be allowed to make one change onto the mountain at the end, but we will get your 4 names if you were to be picking as well. Now, of course, Cahair might make an amazing case for all of his 4 names, and you might end up sticking with that in the end. So without further ado, we may as well just get into this, Cahair, and your first pick on your Mount Rushmore of County Derry sports people is?
I don't think anybody would pick a Mount Rushmore and not have Eamon Coleman on it. I think, I mean, there are plenty of people who have achieved loads in their sporting careers, but what Eamon Coleman did, and Chrissy will know as well as, and better probably than me, but you know, it was the unifying effect that he had on Derry football at the time that he came in. You know, I read an interview this morning with Anthony Tohol from a few years ago, and he put it quite, you know, just as bluntly as, you know, he came into a changing room where boys didn't like each other. You know, the Derry club scene was at that time just ferocious. The late 80s and the early 90s were the absolute peak of Derry football, and that, you know, it peaked for the county team at that time, but it was largely because the club scene was just so vibrant and so competitive, and there were so many strong teams that, you know, outside you wouldn't even realise. Like the one club that I would always look at, Ballinascreen, who reached a couple of county finals and were a very, very good side. But, you know, if you ask somebody to name the best 8 sides at that time, they mightn't even get as far as Ballinascreen. So it was that strong. And because of that, there was so much rivalry within the Derry changing room. Fellas just were so desperate to win for their clubs that it manifested itself into a kind of an unhealthy environment in a way for the county team. And Eamon Coleman came in, you know, he'd been in England for, I think, 5 years, working as a brickie. And he got a phone call in November 1990 and flew home. Pretty much flew home, you know, it wasn't even an interview, it was the jobs here if you want it. Now, Eamon had managed the minors in 83 to the All-Ireland. They won the Ulster title again in 84 under him, and then reached the All-Ireland 121 final in 85. So, you know, they didn't reach the final in 85, they won Ulster in 85. He had taken a lot of the core of what would be the All-Ireland winning team 10 years later through from those minor teams, and then, you know, went to England, was away, came back in 1990. Derry were in the 3rd tier of the National League when he came in, and, you know, not the talent and ability was there, but they didn't look anywhere near a side that will win an All-Ireland. His own, you know, he had his own playing credentials. Eamon won an All-Ireland minor and under 21 as a player in 1965 and 68. He won 2 championships with Ballinwigan. He won another championship with Ballinderry as well. So, you know, he just, and the biggest thing was that he, you know, they talk now about nearly Jurgen Klopp and that syndrome of, you know, this big, large character and this enthusiastic man, and he knew how to get players to play for him, and he knew how to make people love him. And, you know, I'm saying this from the point of view of never having really, you know, I didn't encounter him and much being a bit younger, but this is what anybody who was under him would tell you, like, that he was just such a huge presence,
right,
changing him, and he just brought everybody in under the umbrella. He got everybody pushing the one way. He, you know, the club scene remained ferocious, but he managed to heal all the fractures in the changing room and get them driving one road. And, you know, once they did that, you know, they won the National League very quickly in 92, and, you know, felt from 91 really with their championship performances, they felt that they were on the cusp, and if the cards had fallen right for them, and in 93 they did, and, you know, they were the best team in Ireland.
I always feel, from the outside looking in on the Eamon Coleman story, that his departure as Derry manager is almost like Derry people's version of Saipan. Is that an accurate representation of how you would look at his leaving of the role in '94?
It's probably a fair enough comparison. To be fair, you know, I mean, it's still talked about routinely. You know, that Derry team, and there were other factors. You know, obviously the lack of equality. You know, we always maintain that had there been a qualifier system, there might have been more All Irelands because of how hard it was to get out of Ulster at that time. Obviously, the 91 to 94 All Irelands come up here, and then 95. You know, Tyrone were probably the underrated team of that generation, and they reached the final in '95, but they were in the mix as well, and so it was very, very tough. And then obviously, yeah, Derry lost the classic. It was on TG Cahair there a few weeks ago. Full game was just great to watch, and they lost the game to Down, a late goal, and the county board. There were obviously divisions there that had sort of seeped in over his time, and the county board got rid of him at the end of '94, and it just, you know, the players would tell you it broke the thing. You know, a lot of them didn't play then the following year, and there was protests, and there was, you know, for a certain period of the year, and it never came back. And you know, a lot of the players, as much as they lost the game in '94, they would feel that with Tyrone having gone to the All Ireland final in '95 was probably the year that they really missed out on. You know, had everything been as it might have been, that '95 was probably the year that was really sitting there. And then by the time, you know, Mickey Moran came in, did his year, Brian Mullins came in, it took him to '98 to win Ulster again. And by the time Eamon and Adrian McGuckin came back in as joint managers at the end of '99 and for 2000, and they ended up reaching the Ulster final again, and were robbed really by a wide ball and a double hop against Cavan. And you know, they ended up back in an All Ireland semi final in 2001, the first year of the qualifier. So you know, when he came back in again, he pushed a much changed team back to the brink again. They were going close again, and that was, I wouldn't say anywhere near as big as achievement, but it just showed what effect he had on those teams. You know, they were back pushing very, very close again.
Chrissy, your thoughts on Eamon Coleman?
Yeah, can't argue much about it. I kind of knew Cahair was going to go for Eamon Coleman or else one of the players. You know, probably the one that I would challenge him with would be Anthony Toole. In my mind, best ever Derry player, and maybe the best ever still. So I would have went with Eamon or Anthony Toole. I went with Anthony Toole, but I certainly wouldn't challenge Eamon's one, you know.
Well, we're going to get into Anthony Toole in a moment. Spoiler alert on who Cahair's second pick might be. You obviously, did you make a decision to veer away from picking more than one GAA person, or did you feel that even if you picked your top four Derry sports people, Eamon wouldn't have made it for you?
No, I think you would certainly make the case that Eamon would be and should be it. But I just went along the pathway. You know, you're splitting hairs for me in this one. Arguably, Anthony's contribution was every bit as much as Eamon's. I know in terms of, you know, like myself growing up kicking a ball around the backyard, and Anthony Toole was always the one player you wanted to be. You know, his credentials, the way he played the game, 4 All-Stars, he's captained Ireland, he has managed Ireland. He has, you know, he's won the Sam Maguire with Derry as one of the best players, even though he was still quite young on that at that stage of his career. But just in terms of the way he played the game, how inspirational he was, and, you know, certainly the type of character he was off the pitch too. He's a very quiet, modest man. But for me, you know, the one player that would be echoed around the country when you think of Derry football is Anthony Toole. So again, as a player, I went for him. But, you know, Eamon's contribution and what he did, as Cahair has very, very well pointed out, you know, was massive. And in fairness, no other Derry manager since Eamon has been able to replicate that, you know.
Is it a case, and this is kind of a final point on this, Cahair, is it a case that the greatest era of Derry players coincided nicely with this, or was there a sense that even prior to the 90s there was an era of underachievement about Derry football?
No, I think probably the first point is closer. It was, and there are other men, the Derry team that won the All-Ireland had a lot of success at school. A lot of them came through Mahara teams that made a breakthrough, won Hogan Cups, which had never been the norm in Mahara or Derry under Aidan McGuckin. He pushed that on. There were vocational schools and McLaren Cups and St Pius has won an All-Ireland, that fellas came through as well, so there was a feeling that there was a team getting there. They won the All-Ireland Minor in 83, they won the All-Ireland Minor in 89, and a lot of the fellas, were a blend of those two teams. Really, that was where it came from. And then you had a couple of probably real superstars in terms of, Anthony Tohill, as Chrissy said, could have easily been lost to Derry. And then you had probably didn't have the impact he made liked in '93, but Dermot McNichol was the superstar footballer of his younger generation and was there in '93, back home again from Australia as well. So it certainly, Eamon wasn't the only thing that won Derry in All-Ireland by no means, but had he not been there, it's doubtful.
We'll talk to us then about Anthony Tohill, who is your second pick on your Derry Mount Rushmore. You talk about the fact that he could have been lost to Derry. Explain those factors, because he's as well known for his Aussie rules as perhaps that infamous trial, or famous trial, I should say, with Manchester United as well. But obviously best remembered in this country for just being one of the great players of the 90s.
That's it. Suppose Chrissy gave a good outline of what Anthony Tohill was and what he still is. It is funny that we're 27 years now since they won that All-Ireland. That's a couple of 3 generations nearly of players, and still you would probably have young boys growing up and they want to be Anthony Tohill. And everybody knows who Anthony Tohill was. Everybody in Derry knows what he was and what he was capable of. And you watch footage now, and he just seemed like this giant, and this, he could just do anything with a football. He just was a remarkable talent and an absolute beast of a specimen. And he came in, he played from 1990 to 2002. Chris has won 4 All-Stars, All-Ireland, all his successes that we know about. In terms of him possibly being lost to the game, there was always the threat of the Aussie rules, which hadn't long been a thing at the time that he was there. I mentioned Dermot McNichol there. Dermot had gone in the late 80s. They had won Ulster in 87 and reached the All-Ireland semi-final and were beaten by Meath, and Dermot had gone to Australia, and Anthony wasn't far behind him, and it looked as though the potential of the team could be ripped away very quickly. Anthony went to the Melbourne Demons in January 1990 and stayed about, and it's one of those things. It was horrible fortune for him, but might have been the best fortune in history for Derry, that he broke his leg playing a game of Gaelic that, as far as I'm aware, he wasn't supposed to be playing. Right. Which probably counted against him then when the Demons were having to make calls on contracts at the following end of June, around June 91, where Anthony Tohill and Niall Buckley from Kildare both were cut and went home. And so, he came home, and then obviously he came home straight into Derry setup, scored the goal in the National League final, which we all love. A 45 that dropped into the net against Tyrone of all teams, which is great. And then, led Derry's charge in '93. He was still at the peak in '94, and then the thing fell apart, and he just thought, he went and played a bit of soccer, and he ended up, he had played a wee bit for Mahara Strollers when he was 17, 18, like a junior club in Mahara beside him in Swatra, and but when he came back, he was married to a girl from Park, and he played a wee bit for Park, who'd been another, wouldn't have been a strong club at all, but he played a bit for Park, and the next thing they had an Irish Junior Cup, I think, against Donegal Celtic, there were a couple of scouts. Man United scout landed. He scored. They won 3-1, and the next thing it's come on over to Old Trafford, and it's he said himself he hadn't played 20 games of soccer in his life, and he's over at Old Trafford on a trial. Like it's a crazy story when you think about it, and to step in, and then well, by his own account and the wee bits of footage we've seen, he played in centre half in the couple of games that he played at Old Trafford in the reserves and bits of trials, and Fergie pulled him in that he's 23 and basically said, look, you're just too raw, you're too old to learn it, you're too raw for us to teach you at 23, and he was home again, and he played a bit on for Derry City and that there. But had he really been that bothered about pursuing the soccer, he could have done anything he wanted. He could have played anything he wanted and gone anywhere he wanted. So I think Derry GA fans are just incredibly lucky and thankful that we had him for so long.
Chrissy, you've already spoken a bit about him, but how big a hero was Anthony Tohill to you?
Well, he's a Swatter man, so he's one of my rival clubs, so I can't outwardly say he was a hero, but and just in terms of sheer admiration, in terms of his ability, was scary. I can vividly remember going to watch, Cahair can correct me, but going to watch Derry in a National League final replay against Meath at Clonus, and I can remember being in total awe, sitting in the stand, of how far this man could kick the ball off the ground over the bar. And it's not always common with huge players in Gaelic football that have such amazing skill. His touch, his understanding, his kicking technique, his accuracy was just unbelievable. So he could play it any way you wanted. And I can also remember going to watch club games at that stage too. And, you would have kids huddled up behind the goals everywhere else, and they were saying, almost speaking with a gasp in their voice because there's Anthony Tohill. So there's not many players that garner that type of reception, but Anthony Tohill was certainly one of them.
Yeah, he seems like a no-brainer at this point. You both gone for him on the Mount Rushmore, so we have agreement on Anthony Tohill. It doesn't look like he's going anywhere. The other pick so far is Eamon Coleman, although there may be a debate coming down the line on that one. Cahair, we'll move on to your third pick. Who have you gone for at number 3 on your Mount Rushmore?
The third pick is Martin O'Neill. Everybody will know Martin O'Neill's credentials fairly well. At this stage, it's fairly hard to outline anything that people don't know. But look, in terms of his level of achievement, in terms of what he achieved in his field, it is, for somebody, as Chrissy will know, again, close to Kilrea there, and it's not a big place in a rural town. And you just think for somebody from that close to you to go on and achieve what he achieved was just incredible. From and again, somebody that went the other way, we could have lost Anthony Tohill from a GA perspective. We did lose Martin O'Neill, very young. He was, by all reports, an outstanding young Gaelic footballer. Was a star on the Derry minor team, was the star of the St Malachy's team that won the McCrory Cup and went to the Hogan Cup final in the early 70s. And just not sure if your viewers are aware, but there's a great story on that where they were playing one of the McCrory Cup games, and it was to be in Casement Park. And but because Martin O'Neill was already playing for Distillery, playing soccer for Distillery, the Antrim County Board wouldn't allow the game to be played at Casement Park and shut it off. And the two schools on the morning of the game had to scramble around. And I think they moved the game to Coal Island in the end. And they played the game, and St Malachy's won and went on to the Hogan Cup final. And Martin, in a great interview with Paul Kimmage, I think a couple of years ago, said that was his greatest sporting regret, losing that Hogan Cup final against College Crease from Cork, and St Malachy's led pretty much the whole game. And my understanding is that the last minute, and Martin being Martin, he saw a pass. I don't know, this wasn't mentioned in Paul Kimmage's piece, but Martin saw a pass in behind, and he's probably one of few players could have played it. And he tried it, and it, now you'd kept possession and you'd have wound the clock down. But he tried to pass over the top, got cut out, and Chrissy come down the field and scored a goal, and beat them. Jesus. So, and then he's, very harshly, like he's remembered in some circles as missing a penalty in the All Ireland minor semi-finals against Kerry as well, in 71 was it, where Derry were 4 down. Now, it's not to say they would have won the game, but they needed the goal from the penalty at that stage, and Martin missed the penalty. So, and he was lost to Gaelic sort of fairly soon after that. He was at Distillery. He won an Irish Cup with Distillery in 71, and then ended up going across the water and ended up, of course, at Forest and winning the 2 European Cups there, back to back, where he famously didn't get on with Brian Clough at all, and it was a huge testament to his ability that Brian Clough continued to pick him in the centre midfield, despite the two sort of button heads through a lot of the time that they were there together. But he was an integral part, and for a Kilray man to have scored in a European Cup final, it's class. It doesn't get an awful pile better than that, and then guiding Northern Ireland to the World Cup in '82. Huge call for Billy Bingham in 1980 to make him the first ever Catholic captain of Northern Ireland, which was, right at the height of the Troubles. Northern Ireland playing their games in Windsor Park in Belfast, in the most staunchly unionist area, in front of the vast majority of staunchly unionist supporters. And Billy Bingham spoke in later years about how much abuse he took for making Martin O'Neill his captain, because he was a Catholic, not because he was Martin O'Neill. And that was, again, a mark of his ability as a footballer, that Billy Bingham would have known he was putting himself in that firing line when he made that call. It wasn't made Martin O'Neill captain and then all of a sudden this abuse appears. He would have known the abuse was coming. So his playing career was obviously marked out, and then I suppose everybody knows about his managerial career and how he panned out. Probably peaked at Celtic, to be fair. Though there was great years at Leicester, great years at Villa, won 2 League Cups at Leicester, and really good Premiership finishes, and then took Celtic to 3 league titles, 3 Scottish Cups, and that UEFA Cup final where Porto dived their way to victory. So that was, it was, and for it to end up in the Republic job and to, to take them to a major championships, and I suppose it's that thing of staying around long enough till you see yourself become the villain. It didn't end particularly well for him, the whole thing, and it went sour, and it probably, to some people, it probably sullied his reputation as a manager because of the style of play, and it became his big job, and it became a negative thing, and it kind of came to mask everything that he achieved earlier in his career, and probably the game passed him out a wee bit, as you could see from his return to Forest and the way that things went, and people starting to snipe at his man management and the way that he did things, and it just maybe got past him. But to have been manager of the Republic of Ireland and to have taken them to a major tournament, to have to beat Italy there, it mightn't have been a full strength Italy team, but we don't have too many famous victories to hang our hat on, so we'll take that one as well. And it's just, again, in terms of the level of achievement, I think he's probably hard to push off it, though Chrissy's going to maybe try.
Yeah, I think that losing 5-1 to Denmark is probably excusable given the list of achievements you've listed there, and there's so much more than just the achievements there. There is the political aspect. What position did he play in Gaelic football, actually? He was a forward, obviously, was he? Or
I think he was half forward. I'm not
forward.
Actually 100% sure. I think he was half forward, yep. But
right, okay, very interesting. There's a load there, Chrissy, to make Martin O'Neill a very strong candidate. What are your thoughts?
Well, without giving too much away, the way I went for it is the 4 people that I picked were from 4 different sports.
Okay.
So that's how I went for it. So I have a soccer person in it, and again, you know, it's very hard to argue when you list out Martin O'Neill's accolades. For somebody to play with such distinction and then manage with such distinction as an achievement in itself. Then obviously he has the background. Maybe myself and Cahair being a bit biased again. He's from obviously a Gaelic background, but the one that I went for certainly hasn't got the accolades in soccer to back it up. But in terms of impact and in terms of, you know, the legacy that he will arguably leave behind, whilst it may be for some and not for others, I went for James McLean. Simply because I think he's done a huge amount of good things that are often overshadowed. And I have huge admiration, political agendas aside, I have huge admiration for somebody that stands on their own 2 feet and speaks up for what they believe in. And I think there's a lot to be tucked from that. And when you look at today's modern age of social media and the abuse of social media, whilst he has maybe at times said a few things that have been, you know, antagonistic to some people and whatever else, I still think James McLean's impact has been huge. And I know you might say going for James McLean is a bit of an outlier or something like that, but I just felt as a Derry man, a Derry City man, and a lot of the really good charitable work that he's done in his own area, I just went for James McLean.
Yeah, and I appreciate the credential of what he's done off the pitch and how you view somebody as more than just a sports person at times, and how well remembered a sports person will be. Nobody's going to forget James McLean anytime soon. That is for sure. Could you just talk a little bit more about that in terms of how his supporters in County Derry view him and with how much adoration he's viewed by some people?
I think the biggest thing, as Cahair pointed out at the beginning of this call, and of course it's a very sensitive issue when you're talking about many of the obstacles that we face here in the north. But you know, there is a very clear divide in how people see things up here, and you know, James McLean has come out a lot and give reasons why that he doesn't wear the poppy. He has give reasons why he feels the way he does about certain things in the political arena. And I don't think it would be unfair to say that sometimes the way he's come out and said it, or some of the way that he's maybe behaved on social media, haven't been perfect. But I mean, who amongst us are perfect? But as I said before, I just have tremendous admiration. I think that is echoed across a lot of the people, particularly in the nationalist community in the north here, that James McLean was willing to stand on his own 2 feet and say, you know what, I'm not just going to follow the crowd for the sake of it. And I think largely he has been very, very respectful and given the reasons why he hasn't done that, you know. So I just think, as you correctly said, that's a big reason why James McLean's legacy will not be forgotten. Whether people want to remember it as positively or negatively, that will be at their own discretion, and that's totally their opinion. And I'm not here to force my political opinions on anyone. But my reasoning for going for James McLean is that I have an admiration for somebody that had the courage to stand up and speak and give the reasons why he felt a particular way. He's hugely passionate about his community. I can share them sentiments from where I'm from. And he is, as Cahair will no doubt also claim, I mean, James McLean is very, very well revered in Derry City, Cahair. I think that would be fair to say. And I know he's done a fair bit of charitable work up there too. And, you know, his legacy off the pitch in that way has been largely positive.
That's an interesting point, actually. So can you just explain that in the context of what Cahair said earlier on about the rural-urban divide, perhaps, that exists in County Derry, and how McLean and his supporters perhaps transcend that you were saying there he's got a lot of support in the city, but also, I presume, in rural Derry as well, he'd be very well supported.
Yeah, like I think he would. I mean, you know, whether it's right or whether it's wrong, you're almost stereotyped. Okay. if you're a Gaelic player or you're part of the Gaelic Association, you're automatically labelled as supporting one side, or if you're a unionist, you're automatically labelled as supporting another side or whatever else. But thank God that kind of small-mindedness is now starting to change, and we're moving into a more progressive society, which of course we all support. But James McLean would certainly have a lot of supporters, I would say, from the GA community. He's very open and he's very passionate about his Irish identity, and he doesn't hide that. And with all due respect, why should he hide the fact that he's very, very proud to be Irish? And he's a very, very proud Derry City man, obviously, too. And I know he's played a wee bit of Gaelic football for Sean Doles in the city, but I just again have huge admiration for somebody that has the courage to stand on their own 2 feet and be proud to be Irish, to be proud to be from Derry. And of course, that hasn't made him always the flavour of the month. And like I said, he could maybe have articulated his views at times in a slightly more diplomatic way, perhaps. But again, there's not many people in Derry that don't know James McLean. And there's not many people also that will forget his name too easy either.
For sure. And there have been questionable moments on social media, for example, from James McLean in very recent history. But it's a candidate, and it's a strong candidate. You will have the option to make one change later on. And like you can tell that the James McLean conversation, whenever we have it, is one of the more fascinating we always have. And in my opinion, I think that always strengthens somebody's candidature when it comes to these sort of conversations for Mount Rushmore. Cahair, you were true to your word at the start. You said Derry is a county which is football and soccer, and your final pick is a soccer player.
It is, and I did consider James McLean among others, and largely for the reasons that Chrissy outlined. But the fourth pick that I went for, and nothing to do with the Man United bias at all, but is Harry Gregg, who I have to admit, when I was asked to do this, it kind of Harry Gregg kind of washed past me, and it was actually my aunt, Mary Kay Burke, who Chrissy will know well, who popped Harry Gregg into my head. I sort of was just throwing ideas at people, and I just thought, my God, like, how could you not look at Harry Gregg, and how could you not think of Harry Gregg? And when you look at Harry Gregg, and and I suppose he covers both bases then that Chrissy's talking about, because it's totally different. It's not a political standing up, but Harry Gregg did in Munich when he went back into a plane wreckage, and people shouting at him that it was about to explode, and he goes in and he helps pull 6 people out and save their lives. It's very, very, it's a remarkable thing for any human being to do, and and it's sad in a way that at his funeral it was said that he sort of lived his whole life with the grief and guilt of that day, even though if anybody on that aircraft had nothing to be guilty about, or it was him. The fact that he went back in and saved, we saved 4 teammates and a pregnant lady and her daughter, and it was an incredible thing. And then to have the strength, he clearly had an enormous strength of character, to come back, and Man United patched up a team 13 days later to play Sheffield Wednesday in an FA Cup game, and as far as I recall from reading Man United books when I was younger, the FA alone allowed United to loan several players just to fill the game and fulfill the fixtures for the rest of the year. And Harry Gregg played 13 days later, played the rest of the season, won the award for the best goalkeeper at the World Cup in 1958, and discovered then he'd been playing the whole time with a fractured skull from that accident. And so there's that element to Harry Gregg and the Munich air disaster. You can't frame him without framing it in that context. But then there is also the actual level of achievement. Like many people would have regarded him as the best goalkeeper in the world at that time. As he won he won that award at the World Cup in 1958. He was Matt Busby had only bought him in 57 from Doncaster. It was a world record fee for a goalkeeper at that time. I think 23,500 or whatever it was. And you know, he was a real outstanding member of that Man United team for those couple of years. He was very unfortunate, probably, in that, you know, he won an FA Cup in '63. United won the league in '65 and '67, but he was so badly hampered by injury by that stage of his career that in '65 he wasn't able to play enough games to qualify for a medal. And in '67, then again a similar scenario where he hadn't played enough games, and then about, I think, 2/3 of the way through the season he was sold to Stoke, where he was actually only fit to play 2 more games before he retired. That was all he played, you know. So that, you know, he was ravaged by various different injuries, but he was just an outstandingly brilliant goalkeeper at that time, and an outstandingly brave goalkeeper. You know, at that time, like, there's all about goalkeepers now, you've been a wee tiny bit nuts. At that time, you had to be absolutely bananas to want to be standing in nets, like. And who was it played the FA Cup final with a broken neck? Can't remember now, but you know, that's, you know, there was no protection for goalkeepers in those days the way there would be now. And I was maybe biased as a goalkeeper as well, like. But look, he went on, obviously, and managed various teams. He managed a couple of teams in England: Shrewsbury, Carlisle, Crewe, and it actually was, I'm sure people are aware, but when it came, Ron Atkinson was away from Man United, and there was a vacancy in 1986, and Matt Busby was who he was, and on the board, Matt Busby actually recommended Harry Gregg as the next Man United manager, and the board famously went the other way and went for Fergie, and sort of turned out all right for them.
Yeah.
In the end, but you don't know how it would have turned out for Harry Gregg. But he went back, he came home, he lived his life out in Cahair. And again, just sort of back to the strength of character very briefly, but he lived his life out in Cahair with his second wife and more children. But he lost his first wife very young. Mavis had died from cancer when she was in her 20s. They had a daughter, I think, a daughter at the time. And you know, he just persevered, and he just obviously was a man who, and he was very quiet about Munich. You know, he didn't go singing, dancing. He actually, you know, I think you could tell he didn't speak about it for a long time, and he very rarely spoke about it when he did, and it clearly haunted him. So, you know, it wasn't this heroic act where I'm a hero, you know, look at me, I'm a hero. It was, you know,
much the opposite.
Totally detested the idea of even thinking about the day for the rest of his life, and so for that, he's my fourth man.
Bert Troutman was the City goalkeeper with the broken neck, I think, in the FA Cup final. It's a strong list, Cahair, I'm not going to lie. You've got Eamon Coleman, Anthony Tohill, Martin O'Neill, Harry Gregg. We've already got a good flavour of Chrissy's challengers so far. We've got Tohill, so we can basically accept that Anthony Tohill is definitely up there. They can start getting to work on carving his face out. And you've also mentioned James McLean, but you do have 2 other challengers, Chrissy. Who are they?
So I went for, as I said before, 4 different sports. Jason Smith, who has been, just looking through his credentials today, it's scary what he has achieved as an athlete. And then I went for a slightly different one. I think it has to be commended no matter what sport you're in, if you're at the top of your game. And darts, some people might argue what is darts a sport and all that kind of stuff, but I believe it's an unbelievably difficult sport, and Darrell Gurney at the minute is ranked number 6 in the world, which is not to be sniffed at. So I didn't just want to go for the very obvious candidates. I wanted to put a few curveballs in, and I knew Cahair would go for maybe a few people in the more mainstream sports in Derry. So I wanted to show my array of knowledge regarding Derry sport.
Well, the Jason Smith candidature is a very strong one in terms of if you're putting a list of achievements down. I'm sure he came into your thinking, Cahair.
He did, absolutely. Like I had a long list of about 12 or 13 people, and Jason Smith was right in the thick of it as well. And you like probably was closer to going with Katie Mullen at the minute, but probably just perhaps the fact that her career isn't finished. She hasn't achieved all that she's going to achieve, and I'm not sure exactly what way these things have gone in terms of every county, but it's just harder to argue somebody that's still in their career, I think, than somebody. And maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe I'm being unfair on people who are currently playing and are still in their sport and have achieved. But I ended up going for people who were pretty much long retired, and for not for that reason, but probably in my own head that was what ruled out Jason Smith a wee bit, what ruled out Katie Mullen a wee bit, what ruled out James McLean a bit. Those are all on the list, but just
I think with Mullen, I think it's the story is very much still to be written. Fingers crossed. Anyway, there's a lot more to come from her. I think with Gurney and with Smith, they're at the other side of 30 at this point. There's already a good heap of knowledge that we have about these people, Chrissy, that allowed you to make this pick.
Yeah, look, Cahair's right in what he's saying. I think what Cahair's getting at on is you need more select criteria before you do this again. Look, I suppose like Cahair, I made a list, and it's a wee bit scary to see the amount of talent there is within your own county. And just because I know I can totally admit this, I'm a total GA head, and I think the world revolves around GA, and it's what I watch and read and talk about the vast majority of the time. But when you sit back and you look at other achievements and athletes and competitors within your county, you start to say, like God Almighty, there's so much talent around you, and it is nice to sit back and have admiration for other people and other sports, because we're all somewhere in many ways. We're all competitors, and I think we all have to have respect for people that enter the arena, that put themselves in vulnerable positions, put themselves in positions of scrutiny and pressure. We don't have to do it, but we choose to do it, and that's probably one constant trait that runs through every competitor.
Yeah, for sure. Cahair, we might just get your final flavour of the other contenders that were in contention. Apparently there was some decent GA club in Derry there recently over the last few years that might be worth a mention.
They've done all right, those boys. They've won a few now. It's nearly getting a bit boring, Chrissy. Again, like there's so many. Like again, you could have looked at, I suppose, either Aoife or Eilish, Niamh Cassidy, would have jumped out straight away. And that's not taken away from the men and the footballers and hurlers, but just what they have done over the last 3 years to win those 3 All-Irelands in a row, like, and is an unbelievable level of achievement, an unbelievable level of commitment that you would know far more about than I do. But they have given their heart and soul to that, and you could, you and I could both go down the list of club players over the years who have been remarkable club players. And I suppose one, not to take it back, but a fellow who won an All-Ireland club and sort of thought about but didn't go for it was Henry Downey as well, because Henry was the captain of that team in '93, and obviously huge figure. He wasn't the captain of the Lavey team that won the All-Ireland, but he's a huge figure on it. And they just, there's just so many of those men, especially off that '93 team, where probably a lot of them had massive successes with their clubs as well. That
Tony Scullion, obviously, is another big one.
Yeah, 4 All-Stars. Like,
yeah.
What about Mr. Brawley?
I didn't have Joe now on the short list. I have to admit now. I didn't have Joe. He was a bit too fond of not passing it. But no, look, Joe. Hey, look, he was a deadly man, and it is sometimes overlooked with Joe. He was a crafty wee a pacey wee inside forward, and he could finish, you know, and he was great value to watch, like, as a player even, you know, but just in terms of that level of achievement, maybe not enough All-Stars and all the rest of it.
Chrissy, one final shout of any other honourable mentions before we lock in the mountain?
Any other honourable mentions? No, I think, you know, I could mention, like Cahair, I could add to that list of GA people, but I honestly don't want to appear to be blinkered or biased in any way either. But no, I think, you know, funny enough, just to finish, when you mention somebody like Joe Brawley, and we all have this perception of Joe Brawley, as Cahair will know, in terms of outside sport, in terms of impact, there's very few other sports people in Derry or on this island that has had as big an impact and all the different things that he's done for charities and everything else. So, you know, sometimes you can judge a sports person's career solely on their sports career, but Paddy Heaney had a very good article in the Irish News today, Cahair, about the impact and the legacy that Muhammad Ali left in comparison to perhaps Michael Jordan and all the rest of it. And obviously, you've got to hang your hat on what you believe and your opinions and things outside sport. But for me, you know, without Joe doesn't need me giving him any confidence. But you know, Joe Brawley certainly stands for an awful lot, and sometimes overshadowed the amount of good that he has done and the legacy that he has left behind and continues to leave behind is very, very admirable too.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of Ali and boxing, there is John Duddy from Derry.
He is.
Yeah.
Derry City man. And to be fair, sorry, I was just going to jump in before you cut us off there, Owen, but I was going to mention John Duddy, the world title fight. Charlie Nash won a European title as well.
Oh yeah.
And one man that probably came fairly close to my was Andrew Trimble, who's from Korean, and won 70 caps for Ireland. Like played the World Cup, scored a World Cup, and you know, a very, very consistent and reliable performer on that Ireland team that was, you know, very, very successful over that period of time. And I know he was not a million miles away either. But just to rule out as well, in case anybody says Willie Anderson, who has lived in the Loop for years, but he's actually from 6 Mile Cross, so he's not actually one of ours. So.
Right, that makes the case a little bit easier then. So, Cahair, your list initially was Eamon Coleman, Anthony Tohill, Martin O'Neill and Harry Gregg. Are you happy with that, or has anything Chrissy has said or anything you said yourself changed your mind on those four?
No, I think I'll stick.
Grand. Well, Chrissy, you have the opportunity to make one change now. You don't have to make the change, but if you want to bring in one of your four, which is Tohill, who's already there, so one from Jason Smith, James McLean or Darryl Gurney, you may work away and take one off Cahair's list and put on one of your own.
Well, saying that Cahair has 2 GAA and 2 soccer, I have to take one off him anyway. And I'm going to replace, I can't argue with 3 of the 4, but I'm going to replace Martin O'Neill with Jason Smith, because I think what he has achieved and the legacy and the inspiration that he provides and has provided and continues to provide has to be worth a mention.
Right, very good. Absolutely. It's you can't disagree with the Jason Smith call whatsoever. So our final list is Eamon Coleman, Anthony Tohill, Jason Smith and Harry Gregg. The last question, lads, is where will this mountain be erected? Whereabouts in Derry will you be picking?
Go ahead, Cahair.
Well, there's famously, and South Derry men maybe don't like to admit it, because they class the centre of Derry as, you know, Derry starts at Claudy and comes up to Ballinderry, so they have the middle of it somewhere around Mahara, which is 2 minutes from Chrissy's home there. But if you start in the city and you go to Ballinderry, there's actually an ancient standing stone out the back of Owenbeg, where, you know, picturesque views, out the Highland Mountain looking at you, right in the middle of the county where nobody can argue. Go up and look at it anytime you want. Right out the back of Owenbeg.
You happy with that, Chrissy?
You can't argue with facts, absolutely.
Brilliant. At least we have one agreement today. So just a reminder, Eamon Coleman, Anthony Tohill, Jason Smith and Harry Gregg. That is your County Derry Sporting Mount Rushmore.
OTB AM's Mount Rushmore.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. OT.